Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 24 of the Former Action Guys podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Kramer. This week I have Robert Myers on. He was him and I worked together at 2nd Battalion, 10th Marines. He was with, he's an FDC Marine, but he worked in the survey section. We get into that. We get into his time, his deployment to Iraq with civil affairs, and then, different schools and stuff like that. And then he also has a pretty good insight. He got out a few years ago, and he has pretty good insight on getting out and networking and stuff like that. So it's a really good conversation, just over 2.5 hours. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And if you got any questions or anything, hit me up at my website, just jkramergraphics.com. Hit me up on the email, formeractionguyspodcast@gmail.com, or on my Instagram, jkramergraphics. So enjoy.
How's the weather in San Diego today?
Oh, it's great, dude. It's
of course
warming up, and it's going to be 67.
Oh, it's about the same here. So a little humid though.
No, where are you at? Where do you live at?
South of Austin.
Oh, how is that? I feel like Austin. I heard Austin's kind of going to shit now, but everything like Texas is still like a really good spot to pull up in.
It depends on who you talk to. There are a lot of people that are from here that they talk shit about everybody that's moving here, but there's so many companies that are moving here, and one of the issues is a lot of the the city of Austin is giving a lot of benefits to tech companies to move here, because obviously more companies here means more tax revenue for the city and better jobs for the people already in the city and stuff. But there's some more technical jobs that a lot of people in the city just don't qualify for. And so they end up having to bring in people from outside of the state that have those qualifications. And obviously, one of the things I talk to people about, I'm like, look, if you think that the company would like to pay somebody a huge amount of money to relocate and pay them a higher salary because that's what they're used to living on and all that stuff, you're crazy. They don't want to do that. They have to. At the end of the day, in order to, especially senior leadership positions and stuff, there just aren't people here that with 20 years of software sales experience and stuff like that. So, they have to bring those types of people in. And then, I think that there is an argument to be made about some of the local politics getting a little more liberal than a lot of Texans are used to. But at the same time, Austin has always been the most liberal city in the state of Texas.
I've heard that.
And it just has to do with, the music scene. If you think about art and artists are generally more liberal than, the rest of, or not the rest of the society, but, it's just kind of, they go hand in hand generally. So it's
that would just suck to see another city go the route of LA and the homeless population just go out of control.
Well, the good news is the governor's stepping in and okay, if you guys don't fix this, we will.
Yeah.
So, plus, in Texas, the weather's a lot more difficult. It's not easy to be homeless in Texas. But the city of Austin just bought an old hotel, and they converted it into temporary homeless shelter. So, you can check in and check out, basically. I think you have a max stay of, 2 nights, but it allows you to, get a shower, and they have support services there. So, you can enroll in benefits, and they'll start, they have hiring stuff there to get people into jobs, and so they're trying to do the right thing. It was just an issue because city council rolled back this policy that said that you couldn't camp on the street, and then they said it was okay now. You can camp on the street, and that lasted all of 2 weeks before the state said, no, you cannot do that. It's a public safety hazard.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, it's not nearly... I think it gets blown out of proportion with all the news in San Francisco and how bad it is there. And I can tell you, having recently moved from there, it is terrible. The whole city smells like piss. I don't know.
Oh, you lived up in the city?
Well, we didn't live in the city. We lived east of the city, but we would go because we had friends. You remember Sparks from
Name's
the
familiar.
S3? He's staff sergeant. Yeah, he was a staff sergeant when you were there. But he was he worked for Topwasaki. You remember him? Anyway, he was at 210 same time I was, but when he got out after 8 years, he went to Berkeley and studied political science, and he's super liberal now, but he lives in the city with his wife, and so we would visit them periodically. And every time we'd go, dude, it's just so disgusting. And I had job sites there, and it's just like there were a couple times where we would come out from a building, and there's just like a bag of needles thrown under our truck, and it's just like it's nasty.
Yeah, man, oh god, could you imagine accidentally getting poked by one of those? Like the thoughts going through your head after that would happen. Like,
yeah, so it's like part of our daily tailgate meetings on job sites is like if you run into needles, you need to mark it and stay away from it. Like you have to call in the city and they come in and remove it, because obviously there's a lot of like biohazards, bloodborne pathogen issues.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. So.
Have you seen the Instagram page People of Los Angeles?
No.
There's probably a People of San Francisco as well.
I am sure there is.
Look up People of Los Angeles on Instagram, and it just shows you like it's daily postings of like the homeless people and like what they're like smoking crack on the street, and like just there was a video the other day, this dude just standing there beating it right there on the sidewalk, just standing there like it's crazy, man. I'm like, I can't, and the police departments are like, yeah, we can give them a citation, but like we can't. There's nothing that's going to happen. They're going to get a ticket at most.
My wife was telling me that the city of San Francisco just increased the dollar value for a misdemeanor. To
$1,000.
Yeah, it's like $950 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so like these people will go into these stores and steal like just under that value because they know that
nothing's going to happen.
Nothing's going to happen, and it's not worth the cop's time and the hazard of like getting into somebody running and all that, just all the things that can go wrong. Like once you approach somebody in the middle of stealing crap, so the cops are like, oh, whatever, it's not worth it for us, because all it's going to turn into is a PR nightmare if one thing goes wrong. So it's I would not want to be a police officer in San Francisco right now.
Yeah, I saw a clip on, I think somebody put a clip on of like Tucker Carlson. I don't watch his show, but they had a clip of Tucker Carlson on with one of the police lieutenants from, I think it was from San Francisco, on there, and she was talking about that, how it's $1,000. She's like, so if someone comes and smashes your car window, that's under $1,000, so they're just going to get a ticket for it. And it's like, and it's like, dude, you're so fucked as a regular citizen. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Anyway, all right. So when you and I were together at 210, we worked together at 210. We actually worked in the same building, which is kind of rare. Everybody else is at Battalion. Those sad bastards were at Battalion. We were by ourselves over in like that supply warehouse building. It was, who all was in there? It was obviously supply, and then the liaison section, and then survey.
And that was it.
That was it. Okay.
I think.
So
there's that.
What was that?
I'm just thinking about the layout of the building, because when you walk in the door, the liaison office was the first on the left, and then you go all the way down to the end of the hall, and the supply was on the right. But then there was that double doors at the back of the building. I think that was just into the supply warehouse.
That was into the warehouse, yeah.
Yeah, so then it was just us, those three sections.
I think they still use that building, which is crazy because it was falling apart when we were there.
Dude, it was terrible. Trying to keep that thing. When you remember Gunny Marbut?
Yeah.
So when Gunny Marbut first showed up, he like took a look around the building. He was like, "This place is disgusting." And so I remember him and Gunny Klein got together, and of course all the NCOs and junior Marines, like we started tearing that building apart, and it got to a point where we were like cleaning stuff out, and there was like gallons and gallons of old paint and old cleaners, and like, remember that closet? There was a shower up at the front of the building.
Yeah.
Gunny Marbut's big thing was like, I want to be able to take a shower. So we're like, all right, let's get the shower cleaned out. It took us like a day and a half or 2 days to get that thing like to a point where it was like somewhat close to hygienically safe. But it was terrible. It was nasty.
The shower in the bathroom?
Yeah.
I thought we always used that one.
No. Well, we probably did after we got it cleaned up, but it took us like 2 days just to get all that crap out of there. And then I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, I just remember it was like every time we tried to like make any efforts to get that building like cleaned up, we just found more shit that was just like, dude, this is gross. Let's just close the door and walk away.
Well, we had like our in our office, the window going outside, one of the windows, like the wall was like crumbling away right there. Like the external wall was like crumbling away. And we're just like, what do we do here? Like every time it rains, which it does a lot in North Carolina, Every time it rains, it's like leaking in here. But
Yeah, just go back to your barracks room on N Street because that's way better. Not.
I told everybody about those were probably the worst barracks I ever saw. Were the barracks on N Street.
Well, I heard that like right after I got out, everybody moved out of those barracks and they closed them all down and started gutting them. And,
redoing them like they did across the street. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because when I first got to 210, I was up at the far end of N Street, up by where the VA clinic is. That first barracks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the orientation of N Street. I'd have to look at a map. But anyway, after we got back from Iraq, we drove by there, and that whole thing had been redone when we were in Iraq. We're like, oh, sweet, because we thought we were going to go back into those. Wrong answer. Those went to tanks. I was like, come on, man. Because remember, Tank CP was right across the street from those barracks, so it made sense. Because tanks had previously been over by 6 Marines.
Yeah, I had some of my guys live in those barracks, too. The ones on the corner there. Yeah, I remember that. That's where, like, Lamel and them stayed.
Yeah.
So, let's backtrack. Like, when did you come in the Marine Corps? And why did you just decide to join the Marines?
Well, so I graduated high school in May 2007. And at that point in time, when I was in high school, I wasn't like a terrible student, but I also wasn't like a great student. Like I did plenty to pass. I wasn't like close to failing or anything, but I knew at that point, like if I went to college, that things weren't going to go well. I was not focused on school at that point. And there was a guy that I knew who went to another high school really close by anyway, it's a long story, but when I was in high school, they built a new one and then split our high school, so I had friends at like both schools. And anyway, he ended up going in the Marine Corps like a year or two before me, and he was actually in 210. Yeah. But he was back on, you mentioned it on a podcast the other day, the recruiter's assistance.
Yeah.
He had actually gotten recruiter's assistance from the fleet because his mom was going through like some health issues or something. Yeah. So he came after his first Iraq deployment back on recruiter's assistance, and I was talking to him, and he was telling me all about artillery and all this stuff, and I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So I did the ASVAB and scored pretty good on that. So my recruiter's like, you can do whatever you want. He's like, honestly. I was like, well, what about artillery? And he's like, well, I have 0844 guaranteed contract. And I asked my buddy, and he's like, yes. He was a cannoneer. So he was in 0811. He was like, dude, if you go to artillery, don't be in 0811. He's like, it's really fun. There are parts of it that are really fun, but there are also parts of it that are like really terrible. And he's like, you'll have more opportunities as a 4-4 to go out and do other things. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then I want to say I graduated high school on May 26th and went to sign my contract on May 23rd, graduated high school on May 26th, and went to boot camp on August 20th. So everything, I wasn't a poolee for very long. My biggest issue was weight. When I graduated high school, well, I played football in high school. I was an offensive lineman. I was big. When I first started the process to join, I was like 255.
Where are you from originally?
Well, I was living in Georgia at the time.
Okay.
North of Atlanta.
That makes sense,
Yeah.
The Midwest and the South,
exactly.
they breed big football players.
For sure. Yeah. So
I was one of them as well.
Yeah. Well, so I had to go from like 255, but I couldn't ship until I got down to, I think, 218. And so I had basically between May 23rd and August 20th. Well, no, because you go to MEPS. I don't remember the whole process. But anyway, in a very short period of time, I lost like almost 40 pounds.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. I remember doing like trash bag runs in Georgia summer, right? Because it's like June, July. And looking back, I'm like, well, when you're in the Marine Corps and you're built like me, you learn a lot better ways to cut weight, just like because you got to. There are certain times a year where you got to make sure that you stay under the radar.
Yeah, when the weigh-ins are coming up, you're like, oh fuck, they're going to be in about a month. Start cutting.
But it's like the only guys that I knew that cut weight were wrestlers, and so I was like talking to those guys, and they're like, telling
They're
me
extreme.
They're crazy. So I was doing like their methods, and part of it's like trash bag runs and all this shit. Looking back, I'm amazed I didn't die. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, you could definitely overdo it running in trash bags in Georgia and the humidity and heat down there.
And then that was the first time I learned about magnesium citrate. Have you ever used that
stuff? Oh my god,
terrible.
Jesus.
But my recruiter, who, I didn't realize it at the time, but after the fact, looking back, he's a guy that has also had weight issues. He's a bigger, bulkier guy, but now I know why he knew about magnesium citrate. Like he's had to do it before. So like right before MEPS, I was like on the line. He's like, here, take this stuff. It'll help out. I was like, after that, I hated that guy for like 3 weeks. It was the worst 24 hours of my life.
Dude, it's rough. For those that don't know what he's talking about, it's like a super potent like laxative that tastes horrible drinking it, and then
terrible.
It's like horrible to even get down. You're like, look at it. You're like, oh, it's citrus. It kind of looks like Sprite.
Yeah, it's like lime flavor.
It's
Can't be
fucking
that bad.
Horrible. And then you just spend, like you said, like 12 to 24 hours with your body just rejecting everything. You know, shit from your childhood is coming out. Like you're just like, Jesus.
But the worst part about it is you don't know when it's going to hit. So you drink it, and it's like you're then just kind of like you don't want to venture too far away from a bathroom because you have no idea like when it's going to come, and then when it comes, it's just like 12 hours of hell. It's terrible. But anyway, so I went to boot camp in August 2007, and then I guess I finished early November, maybe.
Okay.
No, I guess it was right before Thanksgiving because my boot camp leave kind of spanned Thanksgiving, and then I went to MCT like right after it was. They had one MCT class between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then I went on leave again over Christmas, and then went to Fort Sill right after New Year's. I think I got there on like January 2nd or something like that. Let me tell you, MCT in November in North Carolina is terrible. It is cold, and in North Carolina, basically MCT, you just spend it in the swamp. Like, that's it. So you're like low crawling through these, just giant bogs, and it was, MCT is what MCT is. But there's another guy that was in survey that you would know, Street. He's at Pendleton. Yep. He's an MCT instructor at Pendleton. And recently, are you familiar with the show that Laura Lang does on CNN? I can't remember what it's called, but she does like specials on random stuff, and they did a special on the Camp Pendleton integration of females into MCT because when I went through and when you went through, all the females went to the East Coast for MCT because Camp Pendleton they didn't have any females at MCT at Camp Pendleton. Anyway. They did a CNN like 1 hour special on MCT covering female integration and all that stuff. But watching MCT there, I'm like, dude, I wish I went there. Like, that looks fun. And I was texting Street the whole time. I'm like, dude, MCT is so much better now than when I went through. Like, they're doing so much shooting. And,
oh, really?
Like, honestly, it looks like fun. Like, when I was at camp I guess it was at Camp Johnson or Camp Geiger when I went through MCT. And it was just terrible. I felt like, looking back, I'm like, we did land nav for like half of the 3 weeks. It was just like dumb. But
yeah, mine was pretty shitty too. Like when I went, I was there in September. I think it was September of 2006, and there were like hurricanes and stuff coming. There was like all these storms. So every time we had a major event, like doing the confidence course or doing the endurance course, where you have to go through the mud and shit.
Yeah.
It was canceled every time because because it would just get rained down. They were like, you can't get on these obstacles because they're too slick or whatever.
Oh yeah, because like anything, like even the O course, which is all wood, like you can't get on that when it's raining. Or anything,
so we didn't do any of that shit. And I just remember MCT. I mean, MCT was cool because it introduces you to like the different machine guns and stuff like that, and you get to. But yeah, I'm the same way. Like MCT overall for me was like, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I didn't think it was that great, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
it's more than like the Army guys get and stuff. I think because they do all that shit we do in MCT in boot camp. So
So anyway, did that. Went home over Christmas and then went to Fort Sill. And luckily, since I went right at the beginning of the year, it was when a bunch of classes were picking up. So, like you've talked about on previous podcasts, there are a lot of guys that spend a lot of time in holding at Fort Sill waiting to pick up with a class. And I've never understood why the class schedule is the way it is there, and so many guys end up just sitting there for like 1 or 2 or 3 months. Like, it's crazy. But luckily, I showed up there and rolled straight into what is it called? I don't even remember what it's called. The FDC course. I can't remember the long name of it, but I actually ended up going with another buddy who I went to high school with. His name's Micah Voss. He's out. He got out after 4 years as well, but that was kind of cool going to, MOS school with a dude I went to high school with, and then another guy that was recruited by my recruiter also. We didn't go to school together or anything, but he was like in the same pool league group as me, so we all went to MOS school together at Fort Sill.
Did you guys go to boot camp and stuff together as well?
No, it was like, you know how it is with boot camp. It's like they pick up every week, so
yeah,
it's all, the logistics of all that.
Yeah, I didn't know if maybe you went on the buddy program or something like that. Some people do that.
My buddy that came back on recruiter's assistance, he was talking to me and the other guy I went to high school with, and our recruiter was like, yeah, they have the buddy program. And my buddy's like, dude, do not do that. He's like, if you do that, the only thing that's going to happen is the first 3 weeks of boot camp is going to be hell, because the drill instructor is going to make fun of you, and they're going to like pick on you too. If one does something wrong, the other one is automatically
get your buddy.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I'm telling you, just don't do it. He's like, you may end up in the same platoon at boot camp or whatever. He's like, but even if that happens, don't mention anything that you guys went to high school together or anything like that. Don't tell anybody.
I think we had a kid in my platoon that came in with his buddy on the buddy program, and they still put the other kid in another platoon.
That's
funny. They're like fuck him. Yeah, like send him over there. So after you, when you were going through Fort Sill and stuff, how was the training there for you as a FDC Marine? Like, what was kind of like the progression of training, and what were your thoughts on like, oh shit, I should have, were you happy with the job you chose, or were you like, man, I should have done something different?
Through MOS school, I thought the training was really good. One of the things, just kind of as an aside, my memory of all this stuff is not great. So
nobody's is.
Yeah, so I've been racking my brain the past couple of weeks listening to all the guys talk about Fort Sill, like trying to remember these different things and whatever, but I thought the training was really good. It kind of made sense. You go through a logical progression of, like, you start with, what is artillery? Like, what's the history of artillery? What are the recent advancements and all that stuff? And then you start with, everything's manual. So you're doing all the FDC stuff manually. And then after, I think, FDC school was like 6 weeks. So, like, the first week was just like an intro, and then you have like a week and a half of manual calculations and map reading and all that stuff. And then you start, we had like 3 weeks on FATEDs. Like, there was a considerable amount of time spent on FATEDs, and I think half of it was spent troubleshooting the things. Like, they were in 07. I feel like we were still tadpoles. I don't remember.
They were in those green boxes, those weird. Well, they're all in green boxes, but they were in like a dark, like different one. I don't know. I remember when I first got the 210, they still had tadpoles.
Yeah,
and we switched over to something else. Real quick though, do you want to explain to people that aren't artillery, like, what FDC's role, the fire direction control, like what their role is within the artillery battery?
Yeah. Okay. So, you are a JTAC, or forward observer. You started as a forward observer and ended as a JTAC. But the primary mission of an 0861 forward observer is to observe the battle space and communicate to the individual batteries, and so that we can create fire missions. And so basically the way that it goes is that you'd call into the radio, give us a fire mission, and the first place that goes is to the FDC. And once it gets to the FDC, the purpose of the Fire Direction Control Center, where fire direction controlmen operate, is to translate what you're looking at and the type of mission that you are giving into something that the cannons can shoot. So providing direction and loading for charges for the rounds, and picking out the round counts, and the FDO is then kind of, FDO being fire direction officer, is picking out which guns are going to fire in what order, and which guns are going to fire what rounds. The FDO is looking at all the round counts on the battery, and determining, who's going to get which parts of the fire mission and things like that. So basically the way the FDC works is you have a comm guy who's there basically on the radio, and then you have two FDC guys that are actively running missions. So they're both sitting at an FATIDS, and they're, if you only have one mission going, they're both calculating the same mission. And so that's giving basically a QC to the ops chief. The ops chief is a senior fire direction controlman who has gone through another safety course, which we can get into later on. But basically he's reviewing all the data that the fire direction control guys are coming up with in their FATIDs or whatever system they're using, and verifying it against what the fire mission was, making sure that everything is coming out correctly, and then it gets distributed to the guns. And when I was I've heard you talk about digital a lot on previous podcasts. Dig did not work when I went through FDC school. Like, it was a thing. We learned it, but even the instructors were like, we're still working out a lot of issues with this thing. And they were like, we'd be surprised if you do this in the next 2 years in the field, in the fleet. And so everything was still communicated on the radio. I guess, is that a good enough explanation of what a FDC guy does?
Yeah, you basically take, for layman's terms, I guess you basically take the target data that the forward observer gives you, and then you translate it into the firing data for the guns. So correct. I'm like, hey, my target's here, and based on the location of the battery, which you, as somebody that was in survey and FDC, you pinpoint, like, this is where we're at, and then you use, math to figure out where the gun should be aiming. So don't you guys tell each individual gun, like, what their aim points are, or not their aim points, but like, hey, gun one, you're like, I don't know.
Okay, so
I don't know.
So an easier way to explain it is that the way that an artillery gun is aimed is using mils, which is a fraction of a degree. And the purpose for using mils instead of degrees is that degrees are not accurate enough. And so I think there's 3,600 mils, right?
No, 6,400.
Or 6,400 mils, sorry.
Get out of here.
Dude, it's been a long time. Dude, I got out in 2011. It is 2020, bro. Anyway, so 6,400 mils, you can imagine there's a lot of variation. Even, each gun is 50 meters apart from each other. Each gun's going to have a slightly different setting to hit the same aim point, especially when you're shooting, 10, 12, 14 miles away. There's going to be variation. So every gun gets a separate aim point and separate, I can't remember what they call it.
The firing data as well.
Yeah, they get individual firing data by gun. And so the advantage of having individual firing data by gun is that you can say, shoot a loom with 2 or 3 guns and shoot HE with 2 or 3 guns. So, that the first couple of guns are putting loom in the sky in preparation for the HE, so that if it's a night mission, you're able to actually see the battlefield and make sure that you're correct any deficiencies in your targeting data right before that HE round gets shot off. HE being high explosive or whatever kind of round you're asking for based on the target.
So coming from school and the training you got there, what was your first unit? Was your first unit 210?
My first unit was 210, and I spent 0 time in an FDC. I got to 210 and checked in, and I went there with one other guy that I went to school with, and the guy that I went to school with, he went to an FDC. No, he went to the headquarters, so he went to the COC, and I went to survey. Because when I checked in, all the guys in 210 headquarters had recently gotten back from Iraq, so we got a boot drop, of course, and I was part of that boot drop. And so they were, at that time, they had just come off of, I want to say, It's not. They don't call it an infantry mission, but
provisional infantry.
Yeah, provisional infantry. So they had just gotten back from Iraq on a provisional infantry mission. So they were standing back up as an artillery unit. And so they were trying to get like all of the basics of artillery covered. Like when I checked in, I think there were 2 FOs. Like the whole liaison section was like 2 guys. And so when I checked in, I think like the week after, there was a boot drop of like 0861s or 7 or something like that. It was crazy. And then I can't remember. I think it was Wilson that got there. Was Wilson there when you checked in the liaison office?
Staff Sergeant Wilson?
Yes.
Black dude?
No, Eric.
Eric Wilson? Oh, yeah, he was there. I know him.
Because he came in. He wasn't deployed with them on that mission, but he was like the liaison chief until Gunny Klein got there.
Okay.
So it was like, I think so. No? I could be wrong.
There was the other guy. Oh, what was his name? He was only there for like a month or 2, and then he went to recon to be their fires chief.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
He wore glasses.
Yeah, I remember that.
Dude, I was a lap mover. I remember checking in. Sergeant Kramer.
His name?
I cannot remember. I'll have to text Gunny Klein or Master Sergeant Klein. But I remember coming in, and this dude would not look at me and would not speak to me.
That's funny.
He was basically like, "Get this fucking sergeant out of," He did not. The only time he spoke to me was, I remember going into Afghanistan. He was on his way out, and we crossed paths in Kyrgyzstan, and he was just like, "Hey, what's up, man?" Super like it when it was to me it was one of those like. I think he realized I know what the fuck I'm doing now. Because, when I showed up, I was a motor T guy that just showed up to become a forward observer, and they're like, now we got to teach a sergeant how to do shit. So, yeah. I can't remember his name, though.
So, anyway, I went straight to the survey section, and when I got there, Gunny Spears was there. He was the survey chief. And then it was Corporal Norwood and Corporal McGowan at the time, I think, and Lance Corporal V. Hill. And Lance Corporal V. Hill that dude's awesome. I haven't talked to him in a long time. He's Terminal Lance, when I got there, like, he knew his shit as it pertained to artillery stuff, but he was just
a belligerent dude. Huh?
Yeah, just belligerent.
The field Marine.
Yeah, exactly. So he knew what he was doing, and he's the guy who I learned the most from. But it kind of sucked because when I got there, I was the only boot, and there was, these 3, the 2 senior corporals, they both picked up sergeant pretty quickly after that. And this Terminal Lance and me, and I'm the only boot. So, of course, I obviously got the brunt of everyone's, training and mentoring for better or worse. I think it taught me a lot. And then Sergeant Young came in. You remember Josh Young?
I don't think so.
He's still in. He's at 29 Palms. I think he's gunny now. I don't know what he's doing at 29 Palms. I haven't talked to him in a while. He might be a coyote or something. I don't know. But anyway, so I went there straight to survey. And then, of course, I was volunteering for everything, just because like everything you learn like through MOS school and everything, all the staff NCOs always preach like volunteer for anything because you don't want to get stuck, kind of being that one guy who's never had any other training and not qualified to do anything. Except when I got there, I think McGowan was like, volunteer for everything except licenses. He's like, do not get a license for anything other than a Humvee. He's like, you'll thank me later. Just don't get a license for anything other than a Humvee.
They're like, hey, we're going to send you to become a bus driver. You're like,
yeah, exactly. You get the bus license or you get a 7-ton license, and then it's like you get pulled to do everything. So
then all of a sudden you find yourself being in the S4, being a fucking S4 bitch.
Sure. Yeah. So when I got to 210, like I said, they just come off a provisional infantry mission, and all the batteries had been assigned to 310, I think, while they were gone, and so we got Fox and Golf back at that time. But all those guys had also just come back from various places. There's they weren't really staffed when they were at 110 or 310. They were just kind of there in a holding pattern. There was like, essential personnel only. They weren't really doing anything while 210 was deployed. Or the majority of the guys were deployed with 210's, provisional infantry thing. So we got back. We had a whole bunch of people who either just got there from MOS school and had no real experience, or they had just come back off a deployment doing provisional infantry and hadn't done artillery in a really long time. So we were in the field like constantly doing dry fire, just doing the, rolling into a gun position and setting everything up, placing the guns, doing mock fire missions, breaking it down, moving to another pause, doing it over and over and over again.
What do you guys call that? R-sopping?
Yeah, R-sopping. I don't even know what that means. But
like area reconnaissance and I don't know, standard operating procedures or some shit.
I don't know. But a lot of just go in, set up, do a couple fire missions, shooting nothing, and break down, do it all over again. And so I got a lot of survey experience right off the bat. And so I guess I should cover what artillery survey does.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead and explain what survey does in the battery.
So going back to how the FDC gives the guns fire missions, and looking at where the guns are, known exact locations, where exactly they're pointed is very important. With all of our technology today, there are systems on the guns that know exactly where they are, they know where they're pointed and all those things, but technology can always go down. So the purpose of the survey was to verify what the gun was telling the section chief, and the section chief is in charge of the gun. But also as a backup, if the onboard systems, I don't even remember what that system's called on the howitzer, but anyway, so we would use survey control points, the same thing as what an actual like land surveyor would do coming out to your property. You have a survey control point on your property as a frame of reference, or various Army Corps of Engineers has survey control points literally all over the United States. And so we established that would be our known point, and from there we would lay an azimuth on a gun position and put a reference stake at each end, and then put an aiming circle on it. An aiming circle is just, again, a safety check. We use a system called the iPads, not to be confused with an Apple iPad, but the iPads is the improved positioning and azimuth determining system.
There you go.
Yeah, it's this thing that gets mounted into a Humvee, and there's like specific dimensions. So when it gets installed in the Humvee, it has to be installed in like the exact right place, because all of the calculations are based off of the mounting. And then there's a thing on the door where you put a plumb bob like you'd use in building a house to determine plumb. It's just a string with a weight on the end, and at the end of the weight it just goes down to a point. And so you park the Humvee over this survey control point, and you use your plumb bob to make sure that you are exactly correctly aligned and positioned on the survey control point, and then you initialize the system and you input where you are, because we would carry around, like say we're at Bragg, we would carry around a book of every survey control point on Fort Bragg, and that book had all of the position coordinates, elevation, and all that stuff for every single survey control point. It also had the year of last update, so they periodically go through and verify all the locations and update it. So we would usually try to go to a recently updated one. But anyway, so you go pull up a survey control point and then initialize the system, and then you start driving. It has a gyroscope in it that is it's sensing all your movements. It's not connected to GPS or anything, so it's sensing all the vehicle's movements, elevation changes, and everything. And so when you roll up onto a gun position, it already knows where you are, and basically you stop and you tell the system to mark that point, and then you drive 100 meters, and then you stop again and you mark that point, and it tells you the 2 points in coordinates, and then it tells you the azimuth between the 2 points, azimuth being the direction. And then so we put the aiming circle on, declinate it to north, true magnetic north, and then adjust every basically every base you have a correction factor, because there's true north and there's magnetic north, and you have to use the correction factor because you're declinating on magnetic north, but then you have to correct to true north, and then once you correct to true north, then you verify that azimuth, and then you're done. And so
that sounds simple.
Yeah, very simple, right?
So what do you do in like a combat situation where Corps of Engineers hasn't driven around and put all these survey control points down?
So there are a couple of different things you can do, and this is kind of getting to the far reaches of what I remember. But you basically, like, you can use essentially star charts to determine your exact location, and you can basically run off of magnetic north for a time period. But in an ideal world, there would be some sort of survey data, even if it was like very old and very degraded. Like, I feel like I'd have to go back to the manual, or even McGowan's a contractor now, and he teaches this shit at Fort Sill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I'd have to call him, but I don't remember.
GPS
I remember. There was a system that we had that's called GPSS, and so it's a super accurate GPS system. They actually use it in actual land survey for, like, civilian use. But it's made by Trimble, and this is coming back to me now. I only did it a few times, but basically you have, so like a standard GPS on your phone is one location. It has, your phone is the GPS unit, but the way the GPSS system works is there are three, you set up three, it's like an array of GPS points, and then you set those up together, and then it takes like 2 hours.
Oh, really?
It's sitting there getting like really accurate information, GPS information, for your known location. And so basically what you would do, if you were in a real combat situation, you'd have to set up probably 2 survey control points, and you would use the GPSS to establish those control points. And then we had what's called a theodolite. The theodolite is a very accurate survey telescope. It's manual survey, but it's super accurate. So you set that over one of your 2 known survey control points, and then you get your azimuth by calculation, by doing a calculation between the 2 grid points to determine the azimuth between those 2, and then you set that on your theodolite, and then from that point, now you know what direction that theodolite is pointing, and then you can turn it around, and you can start doing, you can shoot. It's called shooting an azimuth. You shoot an azimuth to another point, and then somebody walks out, however far, to the farthest he can go, and still be in sight line, and basically using the theodolite, you can determine the exact location of where that guy's standing. You put another survey point there, and then you take the theodolite to that point, and then you start doing this thing where you're just following a chain of known locations until you get to exactly where you need to lay in a battery on an azimuth.
So this sounds like something that would happen if you're like, you're obviously not doing this like during the push to Baghdad. This is something where you're in a more established firing point at that point, right? Like, hey, we're going to sit here for a little bit.
I mean,
because it seems like that's a timely process, and
it's
obviously
time-consuming, but
time-consuming, not timely.
The way I would think about it is, obviously, when we push into Iraq, we push from Kuwait, right? And so the artillery is always going to be behind the push. And so you're going to have time where, in a more traditional battle landscape, where you're pushing through and you have a front line and you have the rear and all in between, you have time while they're battling on the front line. Your artillery surveyor would be kind of going ahead of where the artillery is, but behind where the push is, and kind of laying in future known points.
So you're constantly bounding ahead, but staying behind the front line.
Exactly. And so, like at Bragg, part of the survey mission was to work with the Battalion COC, because Battalion COC has a plan, right? They are it's simulating moving through a battle space.
Yeah.
Which is why it's called Rolling Thunder, because you're like rolling through the battle space. And so you're simulating an artillery battalion moving through, or regiment, whatever. I did one battalion size and several regiment size ones. I don't remember. But anyway, part of the survey mission is we should roll up to a gun position just before or during the gun's arrival. We should be kind of finishing up as they are laying in the guns. Mm-hmm. And so it's, we kind of move in tandem with the batteries. And generally, the way that the survey section works, it's much like your liaison section, where it's a battalion level asset. So we are taking our direction from the COC, not any individual battery. Obviously, if the battery has an issue, one of their guns goes down and they need a more accurate position. Like I did a couple ones where I actually set a point at an individual gun because their computers went down or whatever, and they needed to know the exact position in the FDC. They needed to know the exact position of that gun. So we would do stuff like that. But generally, we are working ahead of the actual cannons, but behind, the grunt or, armored ground forces.
All right. So, how long were you at 210? Or you were with the headquarters battery the entire time, right? And then what year did you get there again?
So I got to 210 in probably March or April of 2008, and I was there for my whole enlistment. When I got there, we knew that we were going to be deploying to Iraq. We didn't know what our mission was going to be. So we knew that sometime early 2009, that we were going to be deploying to Iraq. We didn't know if it was going to be provisional infantry or if it was going to be advisory or what. We weren't sure at that time when I got there what the mission was going to be. So, or if it was going to be artillery or if it was going to get redirected to Afghanistan. Because you got to think 2008 is when things were the initial kind of drawdown, and not drawdown, but Iraq was getting cooling off.
Yeah, Iraq was winding down. Most of the forces were out by 2009.
Yeah, so we weren't sure if we were going to go to Afghanistan doing artillery. And at that time, when I got there, Colonel Brennan was there, and he was the commander. Lieutenant Colonel Brennan at the time. He's a colonel now, or he may be retired. I don't know. Anyway, he was the CO in Iraq, I think, for those guys on that infantry mission. I don't know. Anyway, he was basically, his task was to build 210 back up as an artillery unit. And so from April through that summer, we were doing that. And I ended up going to, this is a funny story. I went to 29 Palms with Golf Battery, 210, and then somebody was coming from 310 right after that. And so Gunny Spears was like, hey, 310 doesn't have a survey section, so we have to support their 29 Palms training exercise. And he's like, we're not going to send somebody out and then bring you back and then send you back out, and so you can just stay. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I didn't think about it at the time, but those two 29 Palms trips spanned the 4th of July. So there was one before and one after. So I was in 29 Palms for the 4th of July, which I'll get into that story in a minute. But I also went as advanced party with Golf Batteries, FDO and Battery Gunny and a couple other guys. And so I don't know why I went with advanced party. I had literally nothing to do. So we were at Camp Wilson, and when you go to as advanced party to 29 Palms, if there's an exercise going on, they don't have any room for you in the lodging that they have. So they set up a base X for us. Like, they didn't even have any room in the barracks or anything.
Those Quonset huts out there, and
the tin cans. All those were full because they were finishing up an exercise. And so they gave us a base X tent, and I had literally nothing to do. So I was there for like a week before anybody got there with the Battery Gunny and the FDO. And of course, the Battery Gunny and FDO are like working with all the coyotes, getting all the equipment figured out, figuring out where the staging areas are going to be, where the motor pool is going to be, all the logistical details. And then there's me, PFC Meyer, like sitting around looking at the tent walls, like, what the hell did I sign myself up for? It was funny because I don't remember the battery gunny's name, but he was like a big tattoo guy. And I swear to God, I spent more time just sitting there looking at tattoo magazines than doing anything else. And he's like, I think we should go get some knuckle tattoos. It was like, Gunny, I don't think we can get knuckle tattoos. I'm pretty sure it's against regulations. He's like, but look, all the cool guys in the tattoo magazines have knuckle tattoos. It was like, just one of those dumb conversations.
Yeah.
So 29 Palms as a surveyor was pretty fun. Mainly because, again, you're working with the COC. You know exactly where everybody is. And 29 Palms is so big, like, you have so much time to fuck off. Like, we would just drive around, making sure
29 Palms is huge.
It's enormous. So we would just fuck off. Like, the whole... we knew the batteries were laid in for the day. They weren't going to be moving because, the infantry guys were doing these 3 exercises today, and the guns weren't really going to be doing anything. So... we're like, all right, let's go fucking drive around. So it was kind of fun. That's a cool place to be from just being outside. And once you get away from all the Marine Corps stuff, like there's so much cool shit out there. Especially once you get if everybody's south of Lead Mountain and you go up towards to the north side of Lead Mountain and nobody's up there, it's kind of cool. There's all kinds of geologic features and I don't know, kind of cool stuff up there. But anyway, so finish up that and then we're there for 4th of July. And I called Gunny Spears, and I was like, dude, I didn't call him dude, of course, on PFC. Gunny,
hey, dude.
We need somewhere to stay. The Coyotes are telling us that we can't stay at Camp Wilson, and we don't have hotels. We didn't have any lodging. We didn't have credit cards or anything. And Gunny's like, okay, I'll work on it. And he's like, go talk to the comm school and get barracks rooms. We're like, okay, cool. He's like, I talked to somebody over there. They said you should be good. We went over there, and the barracks manager was like, no, I don't have any rooms available right now. And so we're like, okay, is there literally any building that we can sleep in? They're like, well, those squad bays, they just condemned those, so you can't stay in those squad bays. We used to have those, but the reason we don't have any room in the barracks is because they condemned those squad bays and moved everybody into these barracks. And so we're like, okay, what are we going to do? And then so Lance Corporal Vigil, Terminal Lance, let's go to Vegas. I was like, what could possibly go wrong? Let's go to Vegas. So we rented a car, and PFC Meyer and Lance Corporal Vigil went to Vegas for 5 days, I think.
And nobody knew?
Well, it was kind of like one of those situations where we didn't really there was nobody there to report to. And so we had no chain of command there, and all of our chain of command was in North Carolina, and it was a holiday weekend. It's like, what are we going to do? Whatever. Let's just make the best of it and go do something. So we went to Vegas. At this point, I think I'm 19 or 20, so I'm underage, right? So going to Vegas, there's not a whole lot you can do. And of course, me being a boot, I'm like, dude, I'm not going to get arrested for drinking underage, in a casino or something, and get busted and kicked out, whatever. There's going to be real problems. And so V-Hill's like, oh, don't worry about it. I'll get you some beer. So we went to the liquor store and got a bottle of tequila and all that stuff first night. And then I ended up just wandering around. I'm like, I'm not just going to sit in the hotel room in Vegas and just get drunk. That's dumb. So I started wandering around and just checking out Vegas. And Vegas really isn't my scene. So, and unless there's not really a whole lot to do unless you have a lot of money to spend. And as you can imagine, a PFC doesn't have a lot of money to just spend on random shit. So
yeah,
I ended up just wandering around. I came back and we were sharing a room, and I tried to open the door and I couldn't really open the door. And I was like, what the fuck? So I started pushing it, and here's V-Hill passed out drunk on the floor in front of the door, and there's tequila bottles rolling across the floor. I'm like, oh, this
is
like a
cool. Dead body.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it was a fun trip. It was just kind of it sucked being underage.
How long were you there for? In Vegas?
For 4 or 5 days.
Dude, that's way
While
too
I was
long.
there, I was wandering around the casino floor, and it's when you've been in Vegas, there's hookers and stuff everywhere. And I got spotted as a mark, I think, for this hooker and her John. And so this dude walks over to me and he's like, hey, my friend wants to talk to you. I was like, who's your friend? And he points to this chick with a mini skirt at the bar. It's like, oh, her over there. I was like, yeah, how much does she want me to pay to talk to her? And he's like, oh, no, it's not like that. I'm like, shut up, dude.
Yeah.
I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And so it was just kind of an awkward trip. But we were there for like 4 or 5 days, and then then we had to go back to Trondheim Palms again. Got back on base and did it all over again. So I ended up being there for almost 11 weeks, 10 or 11 weeks.
Damn, dude.
Yeah,
That's a long time to be hanging out in Camp Wilson.
Yeah, it was an experience.
But Camp Wilson blows, man. Fuck.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like being out there doing 2 back-to-back full scale, combat exercises. That was pretty cool. Like introduction to like, hey, you're in the Marine Corps and artillery. And so that was kind of a cool, like right off the bat, not stuck at Camp Lejeune. I'd rather be stuck at Camp Wilson than be stuck at Camp Lejeune, to be honest. So after
I don't know about that.
Well,
I don't know about that, man.
Well, anyway, I get back from 29 Palms, back to Camp Lejeune, and then again going back to what I was talking about with everybody being fresh back from a deployment and getting ready to, be ready for any kind of deployment. By the time I got back, we knew that we were going to be doing civil affairs. That had been, so I got back in, I guess, late July, early August, 2008. And while I was gone, they had found out that we were going to be doing civil affairs, and there was a bunch of boot drops that happened while I was gone, including in survey section. So I came back, and there were 2 new guys there in the survey section. So that was kind of nice to have those guys. But then, so everybody was doing their rifle quals and all that stuff. So we went to the range, did the rifle qual. I think I qualled in boot camp as a marksman. And in boot camp, I had BCGs. And I don't know if you've ever shot with BCGs. I don't know if you wore BCGs when you were in boot camp. But shooting iron sights with BCGs is not easy. And so I think, like, I got marksman just because I was shooting with BCGs. Because by the time I went back to the range, I think I qualled on iron sights. That was 2008 was the last year I qualled on iron sights before we switched to ACOGs. But I had contacts at that time, and I shot like a 244 or something ridiculous, or 243. Nice. It was cool for me being junior Marine, and all you really have without any deployments on your chest when you wear your alphas or your blues, the only thing you have is your marksmanship badges. So it was like, that's what I was pushing for. And so
you don't want it to be a actual marksman badge,
right? So of course I shoot expert, and I think Takwasaki was there by that time, and he's like, "Hey, we have a seat for coaches course. We don't have any marksmanship coaches, and we need to, in order to continue taking guys to the range, we have to supply our own coaches." And of course, I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go to coaches course." It's like 2 weeks long or something like that. Honestly, you learn more about just ammo and trajectories and just getting more in depth on breath control and trigger control and all this stuff. It's like, it's not like that crazy. You don't learn anything really cool, like super high speed or anything. But you just get certified. It's actually like a secondary MOS, I think. But so that's kind of cool, because when you get out, you can actually take that secondary MOS and you can apply for like an NRA marksmanship thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't remember what the MOS number is. But anyway, that turned out to be one of the poorest decisions I ever made going to coach's course, because I ended up being the only coach in 210 for the rest of my enlistment.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Yeah, it was terrible. So once I went to coach's course, I was doing... when you go to the range, you're technically supposed to do a week of training before the range and then a week at the range.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing the week of training, it's the coach's responsibility to do all the training. And so we were doing civil affairs, and we got boots from everywhere. We had to go with females, so we had these female Marines coming in from everywhere, whether it was maintenance battalion or MEF or the command headquarters or whatever. Had all these Marines coming in that a lot of them were not recently qualified. We were going to a combat zone. One of the checks in the box was to get everybody qualified. So, dude, I swear I was on the range for like 8 weeks straight with all these Marines coming in to 210, getting ready for the civil affairs deployment, and we had to get everybody qualled before we went to Bragg in October. And we were going to Bragg in October on an artillery, doing part of Rolling Thunder, doing artillery, which I thought was kind of weird because we knew we were doing civil affairs, but I think it was more because it was like a regimental exercise and all that. But anyway, so we had to get everybody pushed through all their qualifications before brag, because after brag, all of our, Iraq pre-deployment training was scheduled. So all your mount towns, all your shooting exercises, all your convoy exercises, all that stuff was after brag.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like it was probably 2 months straight I was doing nothing but range quals. And we went to brag again in 08. And then, from there it was just, we deployed in mid-January 09. Everybody was basically, pre-deployment leave was basically over the holidays. We came back in January and deployed. So I guess at this point I can talk about civil affairs stuff.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we deployed as a civil affairs, on a civil affairs deployment. And the main difference between a civil affairs deployment and most every other Marine Corps deployment is the length. Because Marine Corps standard deployment length is 7 months. But if you imagine the mission of a civil affairs deployment, which is primarily relationship development and project management, there's not a whole lot you can do in 7 months. So those are 13-month deployments. As a Marine, when you do a 13-month deployment, I don't know how it is in the Army, but because I know that their standard deployment is like 14 to 21 months. Like, I don't know, it's a lot longer.
It's crazy.
But we had a leave block. So you had like 2 weeks that you came back. Everybody had like, they did staggered leave blocks where everybody was going to come back. So there was like, before we went, we had to pick like when we wanted to go on leave and all this stuff. And we got there and they weren't really sure where everybody was going to go. They knew we're like, I think we deployed with 10 civil affairs teams, and each team had 15 people on it between the OIC and the team chief, and then, all of us minions that were, doing security, doing whatever. And so, like, we had a team in Ramadi, a team in Fallujah, a team in Rawa, a team in Haditha, a team in farther. There was like 3 teams way farther south. I don't know. We went
like Basra and stuff like that.
Yeah, we went to Ramadi, and we were originally going to be in Ramadi, but then they said, no, you're not going to be in Ramadi, you're going to be in Mosul. And then we went to Mosul, and they're like, no, you're not going to be in Mosul, you're going to be maybe in Baghdad, maybe out here in Sinjar. We weren't really sure, and we were kind of like kicking around a bunch, and we finally ended up at this airstrip called Sal Sinjar Airfield. And its location, we were like 20 miles south of the 38th parallel. And so the 38th parallel is important when you look at the Iraqi political landscape. The 38th parallel above that is pretty much Kurd territory, and below that is where you're in like traditional Iraqi territory. So that's when you hear about on the news like Kurdistan and the talks of them trying to separate the Kurd territory as a separate country. It's generally speaking everything above the 38th parallel. But we were also only like 40 miles from the Syrian border. So when we got there, dude, it was a clusterfuck. We landed, and nobody at Sinjar knew that we were coming. And so there's these 15 dudes on civil affairs that there's already a civil affairs team there. I think that was from 310 or maybe 311. But there was it was them, LAR, and tanks. And then a small contingent managing the airfield. Because at that point when we got there, I think there was 4 Cobras and 4 Hueys based out of there. So we got there, and they didn't know that we were coming. They thought that we were coming like the week after that or something. So they're like, well, we can put you in this tent, we don't know where to put you, go in this tent situation, which was fine, except when we landed, I think it was like 12 degrees or something like that. And none of us, we were in Iraq. We didn't bring cold weather shit. Like, we had our lightweight, we didn't bring our whole sleeping system. A couple of the guys, I think, brought their whole sleeping system, but the majority of us only brought like the lightest layer. And we had like a fleece or something. And so we were like, everybody's like putting on all their clothes. Everybody obviously had their beanies, but it was kind of cold when we got there. And then we, the way the base was set up, it was very primitive. At this point, most every base in Iraq was built up pretty substantially. Green bean coffee and shower trailers and all this stuff. And we still had those stupid basic shower tent with the
That shit's so gross.
bladder. Dude, it's so nasty. It's like you walk in there, especially when it gets hot. Like when it was cold, it wasn't as gross, but the water was cold. Like there was no hot water. And so you can take a shower, but the water's probably only like 40 degrees.
I'm just talking about just like the one that we had in Sangin that was like that. It
doesn't drain. It doesn't
you're
drain.
standing in everybody else's filthy water.
Dude, it's gross.
It's making me sick just thinking about it.
Yeah, I know. So between that and the fact that the water was cold, I don't think I took a shower for like the first month and a half that I was there. But it was like you just baby wipe shower. You know, it sounds gross for anybody that's never been there, but it gets it done. Like we weren't shaving, we weren't doing anything.
You could be surprisingly clean using just baby wipes and a little bit of water.
Dude, after all those trips to Bragg, and when you're at Bragg for 5 weeks, like, and it's humid and raining, and the only way you have to get clean is baby wipes, you get pretty good at it. So anyway, we finally ripped with the guys that were there before us on civil affairs, and we didn't have enough time to rip with them. I think we only ripped with them for like 3 days. And so I think we did one convoy out with them before they left, which for the size of territory and the number of people that we were talking to, it was not enough time. And I think it kind of just had to do with how long it took to figure out exactly where our team was going. But anyway, so we took over that, and then I mean, honestly, the deployment, we didn't have a lot of projects going on because it was so remote, and there's just a bunch of little villages. I think we had like one school project that was finishing up, and then 2 other school projects that were like, basically what happened is we build a school and then they come in and blow it up, and so we go out there and contract repairs, that standard shit.
What's like the most proud thing from that deployment that you did? Like, what do you look back on and you're like, you know what, that right there I think made a difference, or that right there I'm really proud that we did that, or, something like that?
There was one village, I can't remember what it was called, but we went there like once a week. And we ended up developing a pretty good relationship with like the kids in that village. And so there's a lot of like just going out and hanging out with the kids and kicking soccer balls around that we did. And I feel like up there, it was so far in the middle of nowhere, it was so economically depressed, like for us to roll in every week and just, we'd sit down and have dinner with a shake and all this stuff, and then, just hang out with the kids for a couple hours. Like that was it. I feel like at the time it seemed like, what are we even doing here? We don't even have any projects here, really. We're just helping to make sure that this village stays afloat. But looking back, I feel like it was probably more beneficial than I can imagine to the people that were there, because it was like something for them to look forward to, us coming by, doing something other than just, saying, hey, do you guys have explosives in here? Are you guys trying to build IEDs and all that shit? Like, we're just coming by to hang out. That's really what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I, looking back, I think that was more productive for the people that were in Iraq as far as the actual civil affairs mission. And that was kind of cool. That's kind of cool looking back. That all they wanted was cheese out of the MREs and Jolly Ranchers. That's all they wanted.
Dude, the cheese, that's the way to go.
Yeah, cheese.
Nobody wants that garbage peanut butter.
Right? So that was pretty cool. And then I ended up coming back for a leave block. And then I think it was right before I went on leave that we found out that our deployment was going to get cut short, because it was during the drawdown. So in 2009 was when they were really pulling everything back. And we were way up there near Syria. So it was probably 2 or 3 months after we got there. They pulled all the Cobras and Hueys back to Al-Assad. And so there was or maybe they left one section, so 1 Cobra and 1 Huey up there, just to support our missions and LAR's missions. LAR was doing tobacco interdiction, so they had illegal tobacco coming in from Syria.
Tobacco interdiction?
Yeah,
really?
It was the most ridiculous shit. But they'd come back with these LAVs full of these knockoff garbage cigarettes and
Pines.
They'd just say, "Hey, you guys want something?" So we'd go over there, and it was terrible. But anyway, while we were there, they had all the tanks leave, and then when we left, we convoyed all of our trucks. Like when we got there, we ripped in on trucks and equipment that was already there, but we convoyed all of our trucks back to Al-Assad. And so we were at Al-Assad well, actually, let me take a step back. I want to talk about going home for leave. I literally remember zero of the trip back home and the trip back there when I was going on leave. Like, I remember being home on leave, but I do not remember the trip. It's so weird. Like, it's just a gap in my memory. The one thing that I do remember is that when I was on a special helo just for us two guys going back on leave. It was just us two on a helo ride back to Al Asad, and then we got to there, and they have like this air terminal. I'm sure you remember better than I do. But you go to the
I've only been to Al Asad twice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you go to the air terminal, and it's like basically like going to the airport, except it's all plywood shacks, right? So you walk up, and there's like this window in this plywood shack, and there's this like a Marine and an Air Force chick and an Army chick in there, and you're just like, basically it's all Space A, and you don't have orders or anything. So it's like really confusing when you're like, hey, I need to get a flight to Kuwait, and they're like, why? I'm like, well, I'm going on leave, and they're like, what are your orders? And I'm like, I don't know.
They think you're trying to escape the
Yeah,
combat
basically,
zone.
yeah. So it was like this really funky thing, and because I think that we didn't get orders until we got to Kuwait. So once we got to Kuwait, like technically to be on leave from deployment, you need to have orders that say you're on leave, in case anything happens.
Yeah.
They know where you're at and all that stuff. So I think when I got to Kuwait, I got orders, but I didn't bring any civilian attire for some reason. But when I got to Kuwait, there was a gunny there, and he's like, dude, you're taking like a legit civilian flight home from here. So you need to get out of your camis. And it's funny, because I have this one Under Armour polo shirt that I've had, and my wife, she's like, that thing is so worn out. Like, it's got the strings that are loose, and some of those fibers pull together. I'm like, I'm keeping it. I got that thing in Kuwait. Like, it's just one of those dumb things that's just a memory of something.
Yeah, something you'll hang on to for a while, and your family will throw it away when you die.
Yeah, right. It means nothing really, but anyway, that was kind of a funky. It was so weird because you just walk up and they're like not used to Marines going on leave blocks, and it's like just two of us, and they're like, really?
Like, where are you guys going?
Yeah, exactly.
Won't they, when you do that, when you do the R&R, won't they fly you anywhere you want to go?
Yes, and I ended up going home, but I don't know if you know TG. Mike TG, him and Jeff Sparks both went to Europe, and they went on a backpacking trip for 2 weeks through
sick.
Europe. Yeah, so they flew into Germany, I think, or something like that, and then they ended up just doing a 2-week backpacking trip and then flew back. And there were a couple of dudes that like went to Hawaii, like they just had their like wife and kids, like, hey, meet me in Hawaii, and so they just like flew straight to Hawaii, so they get at least one ticket there for free, there and back anyway.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so you can literally go anywhere you want. And you fly Space A from Al Asad to like Germany or wherever, and then you get on an actual like plane from there.
And when you say Space A, for those that don't know what you're talking about, it means space available, and it's basically like there are aircraft that are on schedule to fly these routes. And if there's a space on it, then you can jump on. If not, then you don't fly that day.
So like when you're on Space A, there are any number of places you could go. Like they were flying daily from Al Asad to Germany, but then like twice a week you could catch a flight from Al Asad to Charleston, South Carolina, flying through the Air Force Base there. There's a person that I went to high school with that was on that trip for like 6 months, and they were flying to Iraq twice a week. And that was what they did. It was just a logistics flight. But yeah, it's just space available on an aircraft. If they haven't met their max weight, and you can go sit on one of the nets, cargo nets, and whatever, go wherever it's going. And preference always goes to. Technically, anybody can fly that Space A, but preference always goes to. There's like a certain order. It's like if you have orders, or if you have like an emergency or whatever, and then if you're going on R&R, you're next, and then if you're a contractor, you're next, and then just some.
There's a hierarchy.
Yeah, there's like a hierarchy of priority, and R&R was pretty high on the hierarchy.
When did you get back from that deployment?
We got back. It was either late September or early October, 2009.
Okay, so you guys had just gotten back right before I got to 210 then. Because I checked into 210 in November of 2009. Because I got back I was in TQ. I got home from TQ in August of 2009.
Yeah, you checked in literally like the week after we all got off our post-deployment leave block.
Okay.
And so like you got there with a bunch of boots too, I think, because there was like a bunch of random fucking people. When I got back to 210, I was like looking around. I'm like, who in the fuck are these people? Because again, when we got back, we had just completely broken down the artillery unit after building it up the summer prior, and we got back again. And Colonel Brennan left, and he went to Quantico. He got selected for full bird colonel, and he went to Quantico. And then Colonel Berkey came on. That was probably November or December. I mean, I remember the change of command ceremony. It was not long after we got back from our post-deployment leave. And then Colonel Berkey mission was, again, Marine Corps, or artillery readiness. So doing all the TNR shit all over again.
he was about it, too.
Yes, he was.
Did you have Kaitonen on your team for your civil affairs? Because I remember him talking about being in Sinjar.
Yeah, he was up there. Dude, so it was... Trying to remember the team. It was Music, Eason, Kaitonen, Burek was our corpsman. You remember Doc Burek? He's up in New York.
The name sounds familiar.
Oh, I've got a story about him. We were, you remember pen flares, obviously. Pen flares we would use to signal they were talking about it on the podcast that I was just, the last one you released. You were talking about the White Star Cluster.
Oh, yeah, with Hamilton.
So, pen flare is just used as a signaling device, like to oncoming traffic. Like if you want them to stop or whatever, your first thing is a pen flare. You shoot it at them if they aren't complying with the flags or whatever. Anyway, we in the MRAPs, we were in Sinjar. We were so far away from everything. Like every convoy we did was like minimum 3 hours to get to where we were going. So we rigged up speakers in the MRAPs because we were driving like through this open desert forever. And so we rigged up speakers because there was nothing else to do except listen to music. And our corpsman was like super into heavy metal, and he's a drummer. And so he would always use shit to drum on the turret stand in the MRAP. Mm-hmm. Well, one day my pen flare fell out of the turret. I was a gunner, and my pen flare fell out of the turret down onto the turret stand. And Doc didn't know what the pen flare was, and he's just drumming away. Oh, no. And I see this flame below me. I'm in the turret, and we're like in a sandstorm, so we're in a defensive circle. When you're in a convoy, if you get into a point where your visibility goes down a certain amount, it's no longer safe to travel because you can't see, like if you're going to run into a wadi, you can't see the road, you can't see, if you get ambushed, you can't see anything, so you basically go into a defensive posture in a circle. You just sit there till the sandstorm passes. And so that happened. We're just sitting there. And I'm in the turret, obviously maintaining security. There was a track unit doing the same exact thing, maybe 300 yards away from us. And I see this flame under my feet. I was like, what the fuck? And I didn't even think about it. I just, without thinking, I was on top of the MRAP, completely out of the turret, just like, what the fuck was that? And I look down, and the pen flare is on fire, sitting in an ammo can full of flares.
Oh, shit.
Like base activated flares, like those
the big ones.
And so I was like, start screaming like, you guys need to get the fuck out of there. And so I like jump off of the top of the MRAP and go around to the back. And my MRAP had the terp in it, and the terp, dude, I've never seen that terp move so fast in my life. He was like, and he does both the handles on the MRAP doors, and he's like 50 meters away, like without it. I'm like, this dude's like 65 years old, and he moved. That's the fastest I ever saw him move. Luckily, nothing happened, but I will never let our corpsman forget that shit. Like, it was this, people, obviously, you went on a lot of combat deployments, and there's a lot of guys who went on combat deployments that have a lot scarier stories, but, there's my scary story. Like, that's a scary story of a civil affairs Marine. And then, it was kind of fucked up. The only other... On that deployment, the only other stupid, like weird things that happened, we were on civil affairs, and there was basically, when we were there was a huge army presence. There weren't a lot of Marines in Iraq at that point. The only ones that were there was LAR and us and some of the air wing guys, really. It was mostly just National Guard and Standard Army soldiers there at that time. And the IED makers from years past generally wouldn't target Marine convoys because they just didn't want to have to deal with what comes after you blow up a Marine convoy. But they'd target Army guys all day long. But when we were driving, like between us, the next FOB was in Mosul, and it was FOB Sykes. And we would go there probably once a month just to check in. There was a Marine detachment there with a chief warrant officer and some other guys there, and we would check in with them, and it was kind of our opportunity to go get a real shower and shave and get a haircut and, go to a real chow hall and all that stuff. But anyway, there was IEDs all the time. We would mark them on BFT, and it got to a point where it's like you see that new section of asphalt in the road and you know exactly what it is. But it's like you get to a point and learn that they don't blow you up. So we just marked them, and we would just continue on about our day. Because by that time, they weren't using pressure plate IEDs anymore. They were just doing, remote detonation, either a cable or cell phone or whatever. So we'd mark them on the BFT. And then I think that a lot of the Army convoys, they would intentionally hit them. To get, I don't know if they were doing it for combat action ribbon or what, because at that time, if you got hit by an IED, you automatically get your car.
Oh, you're saying you think the Army guys were intentionally hitting the IEDs?
Yeah.
No way.
We were marking them on BFT. Why else? Literally, we would mark it, and the next day they'd hit it.
And the BFT's the Blue Force Tracker.
Yeah,
and
so Blue Force Tracker is a battle space.
Think of Google
situational awareness system.
Yeah, you have Google Earth on sitting in front of you, and other people that have that computer in their Humvee or their MRAP or whatever can put points on it, and you can see it.
Yeah.
So when they mark it, everyone in the battle space that has one of those sees it, and every convoy has a Blue Force Tracker.
Yeah, and not even every convoy. Every vehicle in every convoy. By the time I was there in 2009, every vehicle in every convoy had a BFT system.
I never even convoyed in Iraq, man. I sat on TQ the whole time. Flew to Al Assad twice to get my eyes checked to do my lap move to be a 0861.
Perfect.
I flew. They're like, hey, you got to go to Al Assad. You got to get this colorblind test. Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, all right, cool. Thank God. I'm getting away from TQ for a little bit. Get away from my fucking unit for a little bit. Fly to Al Assad, and the test is one of those flip books with the little bubbles, the colored bubbles. I'm like, that's because they were like,
I had to fly to Al Assad for this?
Hold on. They were like, we don't have the equipment here, so you have to fly to Al Assad. And I'm thinking equipment in my head. I'm thinking some kind of machine or something because I've never had my, to check to see if I've been colorblind. And I fly there, and it's just this fucking flip book. And I'm like, what the hell? God. So I pass it, have them fill out the paperwork, fly back. I was there for because of Space A and stuff like that, I was there for 5 days. Fly back to TQ, take my paperwork to the career planner. The career planner's like, she didn't fill out the right paperwork.
Oh my God.
He's like, that's not the right paper you need. You have to go back to Al Assad and have them sign this paper. So I fly back to Al Assad, go to the lady, and she's like, he's wrong. This is the correct paper. And I fly back with that paper. It's same exact paper. And I'm like, here's the paperwork. He's like, okay, cool. You're good to go. Let me finish your package. So I didn't even need to go back the second time. But the cool thing is each time I went twice, and both times I got to be like, hey, so-and-so, come with me. I got to bring up, you got to bring a battle buddy. So I got to save someone from turning wrenches in the fucking Iraqi heat, to go over to Al Assad, which was, they had a movie theater and fucking all kinds of crazy shit there.
That place was nuts. We were there, it was awesome, but I could not imagine being deployed there.
Especially sitting on Al Assad the entire time, it's got to feel similar to me. It depends on your mindset. I didn't want to be a mechanic. I didn't want to be a logistics guy. I wanted to get out and do stuff. And so sitting on TQ was killing me. I was fucking dying because I was like, I'm sitting on base like a loser. I want to get out and actually see Iraq. And we would send guys out. They would send out mechanics every once in a while. I think Sinjar was one of the places that they sent a mechanic, and they'd send them out there for a month rotation to just help the dudes do work, come back, and then send another guy. And I remember telling my gunny, I'm like, hey man, can I get on one of these rotations? I want to get off the fucking base. And he's like, you got to leave the base. You got to go to Al Assad. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? So
at Sinjar, I remember we had a motor T tent, and there was 2 mechanics there. And they were servicing everything, whether it was tanks or the LAVs or MRAPs or Humvees or whatever. And there was just the 2 guys. And if you had a severe mechanical failure, your truck was going to be down for a while.
Yeah, it's
a long time.
It sucks, man. Being a mechanic over there sucks. It's I don't know. We worked on everything. I remember we had to change out. They had gotten new armor or something, and we had to change out all the turrets and like winches and something else, and all the MRAPs. And they sent me through some little course to learn how to do it that they had on TQ. And so me and like one other dude ended up changing out like 60 or something more like turrets and shit. Like had to pull them out, put new turrets in. Like I don't know. Being a mechanic over there sucked though. But anyway, that's where I got my lab booth package. And when I got back, I got orders to 210, and that's where you and I met. Yeah, I showed up. Gunny Klein was there. He was Staff Sergeant Klein. It was right before he got promoted.
Yeah. I remember.
It was right before he got promoted to Gunny. I think he had just come off the drill field. And then there was the other guy. I cannot remember his name, and I feel bad about it because, anyway, so we kind of did the same thing. I think once the other Gunny left and went to recon and Staff Sergeant Klein had took over the section, he was basically like, look, we got to rebuild. So same thing. Hey, get all the dudes. We're heading out to the field. And we would just, same thing, go out to the woods, set up our FSCC tent, the Fire Support Coordination tent, and set everything up inside of it, and then tear it down and move somewhere else and set it up again. So we were doing kind of the RSOPing kind of. But the way that it was good though. I mean, the work, Gunny Klein like worked our section super hard, but it was all like legitimate and quality like work and instruction from him. And I always told guys, I was like, at that time, I would have put our FSCC section up against any other FSCC within the Marine Corps, because our dudes were on point. I had good radio operators. I had good 6-1s.
Well, everybody took it serious. I mean, that was one of the things that, looking back, Gunny Klein did a really good job of imparting like the seriousness of the job. And the mentality that you needed to have. And so like whenever you guys were getting ready to go to the field, it was like, just stay out of the liaison guy's way. They're getting ready to go to the field. They don't need to be bullshitting with you in the hallway or whatever. And so, it was kind of cool because you guys did so much training. It gave us the opportunity to do something other than survey. Like, I'll tell you, survey, it was a cool job to have, but it was limited in scope. And so it got boring as fuck. Like,
I'm
just
sure.
going out and working with an aiming circle and a theodolite, there's only so many times that you can do that. Like, seriously, like, set it up, break it down, set it up, break it down. Like, that's all you're really doing. And there's not... Now they've actually combined it with MET. So now, right before I got out, all the boots that we got were survey MET guys. So it wasn't just survey. It used to be that the survey guys were FDC guys that kind of just went over to this random section called survey, and there was like this 3-week course at Fort Sill that you went to if you had a seat for it, because it was like they could only take 10 guys at a time or something like that. So I ended up going to survey school probably like 8 months before I got out or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was well, I'll get into like kind of ending my enlistment here in a minute, but the rest of the primary means to learn survey was OJT. Yeah. And when you went to survey school, it was like learning the higher scale, more forest type understanding of how like the stars things actually work and the rotation of the earth and like actual like survey shit. And so I thought that survey school was interesting because I enjoyed it. When you're going to MOS school, it's primarily boots, right? So it's a bunch of guys that are just being stupid, don't know any better, and they're just like kids doing kid shit. Yeah. And then when you go to a follow-on course like that, it's a lot better because everybody's already been to the fleet. They've kind of had their fuck off time and, go out and get drunk every night and whatever. And everybody kind of takes things like, at that point, everybody's a little bit more involved in what their actual job is. Like, you have situational awareness of not only what your job is, but how it affects the unit. And so when you're actually sitting in a course, I learned a lot more then than I did in FDC school. I think from just a more well-rounded understanding of how survey fits in the artillery and world and the overall battle space and all that stuff. So,
well, that's probably partially because you, at that point now, you've had over 3 years of experience, of real world experience and application. So when they're talking about something, you understand the terminology. Whereas when you're a brand new boot and you go to MOS school, it's almost like an introductory course. Like, hey, I'm going to give you all these terms. You're going to forget them all. You're going to relearn the ones that are important when you get to the fleet. But we're going to teach you, like, here's your introduction to everything, and the retention isn't there. But once you've had a couple years of, like, not just experience within artillery, but in the Marine Corps and life in general, it's easier to look back and go, okay, I get this. This makes sense, and I understand why we're doing it as well.
So then when I got back from survey school, Norwood got out, and McGowan got out, and Gunny Spears retired. And this all happened like in the same 1 month period. So it was me, and do you remember Danny Pereira?
No.
Portuguese guy with glasses. If you saw him, you'd remember him. Him and King. You remember King?
Yeah.
Tall, lanky guy. He ended up going to the Air Wing. He got out, and I think he's working as a contractor, working on
I think he messaged me on Facebook.
You should reach out to him. Well, you and I can talk about that another time. I can give you more details. I don't want to blow up his life on a podcast. But so it was me and those two guys, and then Gardner and Few and Street, and that was the survey section. So we did one 29 Palms with 210, and this was like the first, I think it was November after we did Bragg in October maybe or something. I don't remember the schedule of everything, but I know it was either the fall or the winter. And we did 29 Palms, and I was the survey chief for that 29 Palms for a battalion exercise. And so it was like I had just come back from survey school, and like I'm in a gunny billet, and I was like, dude, what the fuck is going on? Like, I'm going to all these, the full scale like battle briefings around the Colonel Berkey Pile.
Yeah,
he took shit like really, really serious, like straight out of every manual. Like, we had a terrain battlefield map that
the rock walk.
Yeah, the rock walk that they built, and it took them like 3 days to build this thing. And I think you were there for that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, he's a few of them.
Well, that particular one, it was. I don't know that one's any.
If this was in 29 Palms and I was there, I remember we all went to 29 Palms together in November of 2010.
Okay, so then it was November 2010 when I was survey chief for that one, and so that was kind of, I think of all my time in, that was probably like the most pressure that I felt, because I was going to briefings with the CO and everybody below. And so like S3 was there. Lieutenant Coleman was the OPSO at that time. Do you remember him? I think he's a captain or a major now.
He's a super smart dude. He's
really smart.
He ripped out with me. Him and Wilson were who ripped out with me in Marja in 2011.
Yeah, so he was...
Or 2012.
I was technically working under him. He was the OPSO, and he was the first lieutenant at the time, because this was before... There was another captain who was a major, and you mentioned him before. He's kind of an older guy. I think he's a Mustang that ended up taking over as 210's OPSO. I cannot remember the name.
Who's Sims? Sims?
Maybe.
Major Sims was the XO when the gun blew up at Bragg.
Yeah, so it was Major Sims. So Major Sims took over as the OPSO, and then he became the XO. No. Major Sims was the tall, skinny guy, right?
No, he's
anyway,
not tall. Or he was the XO, excuse me. Did I say OPSO? I meant Major Sims was the XO. I said
OPSO, because there was a captain who was a Major Select, and then he ended up pinning Major, and he was still the OPSO. But anyway, it's not...
I think I know who you're talking about, but I don't remember his name either.
Yeah, anyway, so Lieutenant Coleman was the OPSO, and I was a captain's billet, and I was this survey chief working for him, and I had like a full team. Like, we had 3 survey trucks, and I had 5 guys. Like, we had that was the first time that we had like a full survey section at a 29 Palms exercise. It was good because it was a battalion level exercise. We had like everybody there. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was a cool exercise. The only shitty thing is we had like 3 safety events at that, like shooting out of the box. And there's a guy that I ended up hiring. Yeah, there's a guy that I ended up hiring. I remember it was Fox Battery. They shot out, I think, all 3 times. And it was Fox
210 or Fox 212? Because remember, we had them attached to us as well.
Fox 210.
Okay.
And the only reason I know it was Fox 210 is because I'm starting to lead into the events that led me to not re-enlist. But the ops chief who was Staff Sergeant Smith, I think. He's Gunny Smith now. I don't even know. I know he's on Facebook, but he doesn't have his actual name on Facebook. It's, he's like an alias account or something. But anyway, he ended up getting relieved on that, and then one other ops chief.
Oh shit! No way.
Yeah, one other ops chief also got relieved during that.
How far out of the, when we say out of the box, what he means is like in the impact area, we have an area called the safety box, and so within the impact area, there's a smaller area, and the guns have to shoot within that. And if you shoot outside of that, it's called shooting outside the box, which is a safety issue. How far outside the box were they?
The major one, the round was 300 meters away from a line of 6 LAVs. Oh, and so it was like 2.5 clicks outside the box.
Holy shit. How did that happen?
I was not part of the investigation. I don't know. The only reason I know all of the details that I know about that is because I ended up hiring a guy that was in one of those LAVs.
Oh, no way.
After the Marine Corps, after he and I both got out, I hired him, and then we were talking about our service, and we were talking about 29 Palms. He's like, yeah, I almost got killed by artillery round one time. I was like, no way, when? And he told me, and I was like, that
was us.
That was us. And he's like, oh, you assholes. Funny, stupid Marine Corps shit. But anyway, so I know that 2 ops chiefs got relieved at that time, and once you get relieved, like, it's really hard to get safety certified again. And so at that point, one of the reasons that some guys in artillery talk shit about how fast people get promoted in FDC, because FDC is a really small MOS group. But a lot of guys get out, but then the guys that stay in, like, if one ops chief gets relieved, now you have another void to fill, which is technically a gunny billet. And then enough guys get out or get relieved or whatever, or have to go do B billets or whatever. You have all these empty spots. And so what ended up happening is that there were guys that were going to MASOC. Is it MASOC or MAOC?
I think it's MAOC.
Marine Artillery Ops Chiefs course as sergeants. Typically you're going there, the way it's designed is you go there as like a junior staff sergeant, or even like you've been a staff sergeant for a little bit working under another ops chief. Yeah. But when I was towards the end of my enlistment, there were guys that were going as sergeants to MAOC. That's where McGowan went. I don't know. Anyway, because so many people were either going to B billets or getting relieved. Like, it was crazy, and so there were guys getting promoted to staff really fast. And then fast forward, our next large scale. After that is when Fox 210 again shoots out of the box at Camp Lejeune, impacting at the base of your OP, right? That was after that 29 Palms, right?
That was Fox 212. That was that. Remember how we had that weird Fox battery attached to us? Yeah, when we were at 210, we had that Fox battery attached to us. Remember there was one back?
Yeah, I do remember.
It was those guys. They shot. That was my first field op with 210 as well, and that was the check round. They shot the check round.
So I guess that was
OP5.
Before 29 Palms.
Yeah.
So anyway, before 29 Palms, we had that round impacted at the OP, and I was staying with you guys. Our tents were literally right next to yours, and I remember that was the last field op before Gunny Spears retired, because we heard it coming in, and Gunny Spears looks at me and I look at him, and it's like when you're in artillery, you start to learn that sound, and you know what that sound is, and you know you shouldn't be hearing it.
It's like it's like a weird sound.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, really, really big Nerf ball flying through the air. It's just like you can hear it spinning, and then all of a sudden it, obviously the explosion, and then after that we go to 29 Palms, and we had a bunch of safety incidents there, and then fast forward to March 2011, we're at Bragg, and there was one other incident.
We had the round.
There was one other.
We had the Mike 825 round.
Huh?
Oh, I was going to say we also had that Mike 825 round skip out of the impact area and hit some dude who was driving home from work.
That was at Camp Lejeune, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in addition, at 29 Palms, there was the round that exploded like 100 meters outside of the barrel of the cannon.
No way.
Yeah, and I was at 29 Palms that time.
How did that happen?
No. Sorry, I'm getting my 29 Palms events confused. I spent a lot of time at 29 Palms, if you can't tell. Sorry, that was in June of 2011 that happened. I'll get into that after we talk about Bragg. So we were at Bragg in March 2011, and that's when the cannon exploded.
And you were in the. So we talked about this. Me and Shipton, Kevin Shipton, talked about this back on episode. I think it was 15. Let me look. No, 17. Episode 17. So we give a description of it because we were both at the OP. I was in the Fire Support Coordination Center. He was actually outside the tent on the OP. Major Sims at the time was there on the OP with us. And then you were actually in the gun position when that gun exploded, right?
I don't know
survey
why.
FDC?
Yeah, I don't know what we were doing there, if we were visiting the FDC or the COC or what, because the COC was right across the road from that gun position, which was probably really helpful from an injury perspective because it helped kind of streamline all the Casevacs and everything because the COC was literally right across the street. Yeah,
they said they're like, it was kind of lucky that they did that happened there because that never happens. Like, we're never right next to the COC like that.
Yeah, so, there's...
You got the battalion aid station right there.
Yeah, the BAS was right there. So there's like 3 corpsmen across the street, plus the 2 corpsmen that were on the position, but one of the corpsmen was one of the guys that got hurt. But anyway, we were sitting right there, and so obviously we heard the cannon explode, but when it exploded, it sent shrapnel like through the air. And so it sounded almost like incoming mortars because you have these shrapnel pieces spinning through the air and it's like whistling. And so this was the first field op for a couple of new boots that we had. And as soon as I heard that shit, like, we were trying to figure out what was going on, but that was Gunny Marbut's first large field exercise with us. And he and I and Pereira just grabbed the boots and like threw them under the Humvees and just laid down on the ground. Like, we weren't sure what the hell was going on. We ended up getting a couple pieces of shrapnel like in our Humvee, like the cloth covering was ripped through, and it was pretty crazy. And then anyway, you've already covered the incident in itself, but
well, I mean, so we covered it from the OP. Like, I'd like you to talk about what was like the feeling in the position, like, when it happened. So, like, when it exploded, when the gun exploded, like, what does that even sound like? Because I imagine it doesn't sound like a normal artillery round blowing up.
It's really loud, and there's a shockwave, and we're not ever supposed to be that close to an explosion, and so it sends you into like a moment of shock as you're trying to, whenever anything happens, even through all of our training, like, you go through kind of the assess the situation. The first step of every immediate action is always assess the situation, right? And so you're trying to assess the situation, but it's so unfamiliar. You have like no idea what the fuck is going on. And there's people running like everywhere. Everybody's trying to figure out what happened, figure out if anybody needs help and all that stuff. And so after all the shrapnel was clearly done, we all got up and ran over across the street because you could see the smoke at that point. So we're going to where the smoke is. But by that time, the battery gunny, I don't remember who. No, I remember who the battery gunny is. I don't remember his name. He's a bald guy.
Quorum? Wasn't it Quorum at the time?
Was it? I don't know. Anyway, we ran across the street to go see if they needed help, but by that time, all the corpsmen had already left the BAS and run across the street. The battery gunny was basically stopping everybody because he didn't want it to turn into chaos because the ops chief ended up taking over all the Casevacs in the FDC. And then he basically, the OPSO dispatched the battery gunny, like, go control the situation because everybody started kind of maneuvering over to see if they could help. But obviously in that situation, all you really need is, the team of guys that are there, doing all the triage and getting all the Casevacs done. And then it was like, we had 4 separate Blackhawks land in the gun position to do all the Casevacs and get everybody out to the medical center. And so everything happened really, really, really fast. And then the call came down to go River City, and River City's just, all communication gets shut off. When you're in the States, it's a lot harder to properly go River City because everybody has cell phones. But the idea is, if you go River City, the command is sternly telling you, don't fucking talk to anybody right now because if somebody dies, the Marine Corps needs to be the one to notify their parents, not their next door neighbor or the news or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember when the call for River City came down, I texted Stephanie, my wife. At that time, she was my fiance, and I just said, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to talk for a while. I'm fine," because I knew, given that we're at Fort Bragg, given the magnitude of the situation, the news is going to pick this shit up. And sure enough, like 3 hours later, it was on like Fox News Channel or something like that there had been a training incident at Fort Bragg, and of course everybody's family like knows they're there. So it got a little crazy, and then it calmed down a little bit after everybody had processed what had happened. We had gotten word that everybody was fine, stable. There were a couple of guys in ICU, but everybody was stable that evening. But the Colonel Berkey was like, still everybody's on River City. Resume normal training operations tomorrow. And when he said resume normal training operations tomorrow, dude, there were a lot of pissed off people. And, looking back, most everybody that was pissed off was guys that had never deployed before, and, guys that it was kind of their workup for their Afghanistan deployment. They were going to Afghanistan later in the year, and, everybody, I think, was like, we're only training. We should take the time to, make sure these guys okay, take a break, make sure everybody's mentally okay. And we were staying up at the OP, and I remember Colonel Berkey ended up coming the next day, that morning, to the OP, because I think Major Sims was still up there at the OP, and maybe the Colonel was staying up there. I don't remember what happened, but I remember I ended up standing next to the Colonel, looking out over the impact area, and I was like, "Sir, what?" It was like, just because my guys are asking, I want to understand like the intent of you resuming training today. And he's like, if we were in Iraq and we lost 8 dudes, but somebody was taking troops in contact and needed fire, do you think that our battery would be able to stop what they were doing and think about those 8 dudes that were gone? Or do you think that they'd have to go and help those guys that are taking troops in contact and give them rounds on target to make sure that they don't lose 8 dudes? And it was like at that point where I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like it obviously, like I knew that in a combat situation we wouldn't be, oh, hey guys, we're going to time out to think about all this stuff. And but I wasn't really like communicating it in that way to my guys, I don't think. And at that point, the Colonel, to say it, like sum it up so succinctly, I was like, of course, we're getting ready to go. These guys are getting ready to go to Afghanistan. They need to be ready for a time when you're going to take casualties, and you assess the situation, you get those guys out, make sure everybody else is good, and continue mission. Like it's at that point, once those guys are off position, it's at the medical center. It's their job. They've taken over care. You no longer need to worry about those guys. You need to worry about the guys that you still have. Make sure they're good. Make sure your equipment's good, and keep on rolling. Yeah. And so, a lot of people, I feel like there were a lot of guys that really got pissed off at Colonel Berkey about that. And,
there were definitely a lot of guys that weren't very happy about it.
But, looking back, like, what's he supposed to do? He's supposed to be getting everybody ready to go to Afghanistan. And honestly, from the emotional and mental perspective, that was one of the best events to emotionally prepare those guys for, what could possibly happen if you take casualties. You still need to be able to worry about your job.
He came up and talked to Gunny Klein about it, or, Gunny Klein wasn't at that brag, actually. He was already at Fort Sill getting ready to become the Chief's Course instructor. We had Staff Sergeant Hahn at the time, then Staff Sergeant Wilson. Staff Sergeant Wilson came out. Staff Sergeant Hahn is now First Sergeant Hahn.
Oh, really?
He's over with like Intel Battalion or something like that.
Huh.
But anyway, but yeah, he was saying, Lieutenant Colonel Berkey was like, basically like, we can either continue training or the guys are just going to sit around and think about it. And he's like, I'd rather get them back in the motion. And I know like Norwood wasn't very happy about it. I remember he wasn't very too happy about them starting to shoot again. Him and I had talked about it, and he was telling me how there was kind of a weird feeling within the gun pause right before they fired that next round, that first time shooting again. Because the battery went right back to firing, right? Didn't they take like a day off and then?
Yeah, they took one day off, and then they moved the position because right after that happened, who manufactures the 777? Is that Raytheon?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think it's Raytheon or whoever manufactures it came out and like they tented up the whole site.
Yeah,
it was
they started
like
doing the
investigation mode, and they were like, "You guys need to get out of here." Because they brought in like NCIS was out there and the manufacturer was out there because they obviously at that point no idea what happens. NCIS needs to make sure it's not like somebody doing something intentionally, to blow up a cannon or something like that. I don't think Norwood was there for that. I think that he had already gotten out.
No, Norwood was there. Yeah, he was there. I remember talking to him about it.
Anyway,
but I remember. I think part of the reason that we even took like a day off was they were trying to like segregate all those fuse lot numbers and like the round lot numbers, like what can we still fire with. So that was part of the that was part of it too. But yeah, that whole situation, man, that was pretty wild. I didn't know, like, I was with liaison at the we worked in the supply building, as did you guys, but you guys actually went down and lived with the battery as the batteries were moving and stuff like that. You guys were down there with those people, so you actually knew the guys, some of the dudes that were there. I didn't really know anybody that was with the battery, like Gulf battery.
Yeah,
I think I knew some of them,
close. But sorry,
go ahead.
We ended up getting really close to a lot of the battery guys, especially the section chiefs, because a lot of the cannoneers, like the actual the junior Marines on the guns, they rotated a lot, but the section chiefs were always constants, right? So we always, even battery gunnies, it seemed like battery gunnies kind of came and went fairly frequently. So it's like the section chiefs were always the constant in the battery, and so we all became really close with the corpsmen and the section chiefs because they were like the constants. Bubba Witsack was the section chief on that gun, and he ended up getting really jacked up. He was on a cane for a while. And then the corpsman, obviously, he lost a section of muscle from his leg, and it was bad. Definitely was a weird feeling coming back from that field exercise. It kind of made everybody a little bit more gun shy, so to speak, as going to the field, like even just wearing PPE and making sure it's like there is a reason that we're wearing. I know it seems stupid that we're in our flak jackets and our helmets all the time, but like shit can go wrong, and you can get really hurt. I mean, had those guys not been wearing their flak jackets, probably 4 or 5 of them would have been dead. Like, legit dead.
Yeah. Any job like ours, where you're around explosives, you're around doing stuff like that at any point. Something. I mean, I've had multiple close calls, everything from the OP5 incident to almost being hit with shrapnel with naval gunfire.
Oh yeah, Coronado. I feel like everybody that comes back from not Coronado. Is it Coronado that they...
San Clemente Island?
San Clemente. Everybody that comes back from San Clemente is like, oh yeah, I had a piece of shrapnel go like 3 feet over my head. Or, yeah, and then there was a guy, it wasn't Rugg, there was another staff sergeant FO that would frequently come down to your liaison office. I think he might have been with 310, but he had like the whole bottom section of an HE round that I think he ended up having made into like a mug or something, because it almost hit him or something. It landed like 70 feet from him or something.
One of the OPs on San Clemente. Have you ever been out there?
No.
Yeah, you never really did any West Coast stuff. One of the OPs on San Clemente Island. Yeah. Oh yeah. One of the OPs on San Clemente Island is down by the impact area. Like it's down. You're like right next to it. Is
that where they do direct fire?
No, that's where we do. That's where you just spot for naval gunfire. Okay. It's where all the students go to as well. There's like a bunker that you go down into, and you sit there and call in naval gunfire. But the targets, there's some targets on the beach. There's like 5 or 6 arty pieces laying on the beach, and there's a bunch of armor and stuff, in this big ass field that in the impact area. And if you shoot the targets on the beach and your rounds fall short, and the round hits the water, apparently hitting the water causes the shrapnel to go farther than it normally would. Oh, sure. And that was the issue that we ran into, where we almost got hit by some. But yeah, dude, close calls. It's I don't know. What are you going to do,
Yeah. So then to round out my enlistment, I went back to 29 Palms in June of 2011 and went on terminal. I came back from 29 Palms 2 days later, got married. 3 weeks later, went on terminal leave. And so it was like, dude, I was in the field either on the range or 29 Palms or whatever up until like the day that, not obviously the day that I got out, but dude, I was like unpacking my shit from 29 Palms and like cleaning it to get it ready to go to SIF.
Yeah.
Like everything, all my checkout process, I had it planned out so tight because like in order to meet my terminal date and get all of my whole checkout process done, like I had this very tight timeline to get everything done. Because I can't remember, there's a checklist with like 25, 30 things on it when you get out, your checkout sheet and all that shit.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
some of it's stupid.
Yeah, so I went to Seps and Taps. When I was planning to get out, I was like, you know what? That last 4 or 5 months before I get out, I'll figure out what I'm going to do. And then it was in the field at Camp Lejeune. It was on the range. I was, training other guys to go to coach's course. I was going to Fort Bragg, doing 29 Palms, doing all this shit. And I ended up not having like any time to figure out what the hell I'm going to do when I get out. So I go to Seps and Taps like 2 weeks before I got out. And then the first company that I worked for, the first employee of that company was a Marine out of Tustin Air Base, former Marine Corps Air Station Tustin. And so, like, since he was the first employee, of course, what do Marines do? Call all their buddies and say, hey, I got this job. You want to come? I don't know what you're doing. Come work. And so the company ended up being like 70% Marines. And it was like, it started with this group of guys that were all at Marine Corps Air Station Tustin. They were all helicopter crew chiefs. Anyway, so they always recruited heavily out of the Marine Corps. So I got recruited by this company. And they're like, well, you can work in Colorado, we have an office in Denver, or you can work in SoCal. I was like, I talked to Stephanie about it, and she's like, yeah, let's go to SoCal. So we ended up going to Southern California. I went on terminal leave, and we packed up all of our livelihood into one vehicle and drove cross country from North Carolina to Southern California. And then...
What part of Southern California were we working out of?
Our office was in Santa Ana, and we ended up living in Costa Mesa first, and then Anaheim, and then I moved up to Northern California. But it took us 3 days to get to California. The third day we got in California, we went out to dinner, and we were standing there waiting. This was July. I went on terminal July 28th, July 31st. We're waiting to go to dinner, and my wife gets a call from her mom that her brother had been killed in Afghanistan.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so we... sorry. The day that we got to California was the same day that he got killed in Afghanistan after... He was with 2nd MSOB. He was a MARSOC dude for, 5 years? 6 years, something like that. He started at Anglico. He was a comm guy. And he started at 2nd Anglico. And he ended up getting out after his first enlistment. He was out for like 9 months. And just like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. He went back in. And then went to MARSOC, went to selection. And he was in MARSOC for like 5 or 6 years. And he was a JTAC also. Comm guy, went to MARSOC and then became a JTAC. I don't know. It's like when you go to MARSOC, it's like this whole weird thing. Like it doesn't really matter what your job is at that point. You just kind of do whatever.
They send you to a lot of different schools.
Yeah, those dudes, they go to so many schools. But anyway, so he was a JTAC in Afghanistan. They had just gotten back from like a 36-hour mission or something like that. And they were living in this compound that was built by some Afghani contractors, and thing caught on fire and 3 dudes died. It was him, a dog handler and his dog, and then one other dude.
Oh man!
Yeah, it was bad. So we had to find an apartment the next day, and then we flew back to Ohio. We were back in Ohio for a couple of weeks for all that, which then leads us into involvement with the Marine Raider Foundation, which I'll get into in a little bit after I talk about work shit. So anyway, I went to work for this after we had buried him. He's buried in Ohio at one of the reserve cemeteries. Got him all squared away, and then went back to California and started working. It was kind of random. I'm in the environmental drilling business. Like that's what we do. So it's mostly generically environmental field services. So what I've been doing is contaminated soil and groundwater, dealing with that. You take samples of it, figure out how contaminated it is, and then work with engineers and geologists to figure out how it's going to get cleaned up, whether you dig it out or treat it in place, or dig it out and then treat it, or whatever.
I bet that takes you to some interesting places.
Yeah, my first year and a half, I went to Atlanta, Missouri, a lot of military bases. Dude, military bases are some of the nastiest, most contaminated places in the world.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean...
Yeah, so I was up at Vandenberg Air Force Base. That's a pretty cool Air Force base. Have you ever been there? That's where SpaceX launches all their rockets from.
Oh, way out in the desert?
No, it's way up north of Santa Barbara.
Oh, no, I haven't been to that.
Yeah, it's kind of along very southern end of the Central Coast.
I know where you're talking about. I was actually looking the other day at their rocket schedule. I want to go up there and get some photos of a launch because they put it out to the public.
Area. Yeah, and there's a viewing area where you can go and watch the launches.
And you can also, if you're a photographer, you can actually get a pass and you go up before the launch, like a day or two before the launch, and they let you set your cameras up by the launch pad.
That's awesome.
With triggers that'll trigger whenever it launches. That's like a thing that some photographers do. That's where you get these wicked shots of these rockets going off. But yeah, I'd like to go up there sometime. Take my kid up there.
I'm gonna go take a piss break real quick.
Cool.
I don't know.
We were talking about Vandenberg. Oh, so how was the transition for you when you got out? Did you have a job lined up already, or did you kind of fall into that job? And were you recruited, or did you seek it out?
So I was thinking about it. I think I got my timeline kind of screwed up. I think I ended up doing SEPs and TAPs before that trip to 29 Palms in June. So we did Bragg in March, and then nothing in April except supporting local field exercises, and then May was all getting ready to go to 29 Palms / doing ranges, and then 29 Palms in June. So I think I did SEPs and TAPs in like May.
Okay.
Or maybe April. Probably April, because I got the opportunity. They recruited me there, which is kind of funny because they're coming to Camp Lejeune to recruit. But the company, when I got hired, I was employee like 44. So it's not like it's a huge company. And so they were very picky about kind of like the personality types and types of people that they like to hire. And so I guess I just got lucky in the way that, when you go to separations classes, there's a lot of guys there that just show up in like sweatpants and a sweatshirt and whatever and just roll in because they're checking the box. But, when you actually when you register for it and they send you like a briefing thing, they tell you like there are employers there. It's like you don't have to meet with any of them, but it's worthwhile interview experience because obviously at this point most guys, if they've done interviews, it's for stuff when you're in high school or like shortly after high school, like surveying jobs and stuff like that. It's not like a legit like a career interview. Mm-hmm. And so I went dressed like slacks and a collared shirt and a tie because I wanted to at the very least get a couple of interviews just so I could get a better feel for like communicating outside of the Marine Corps in a professional way. Mm-hmm. And so right off the bat, you show up in slacks and a button-down shirt, and you're already, ahead of the game in terms of trying to actually land a job. But I talked to his name's Jose. Shout out Jose Suarez, also a Marine, former CH-46 crew chief. Anyway, I talked to him the first time, and he really liked me, and that was probably like Tuesday afternoon at one of the breaks in SEPs and TAPs, and then we ended up going out to dinner, I think, like that Thursday, and he gave me an offer on like that Friday or something. So it like all went really fast, and even when I got the offer, I still had the opportunity to choose where I wanted to go. He's like, you can either go to Colorado or go to Southern California. And I talked to Stephanie, and Stephanie and I were still, like, she was my girlfriend at that point. And was talking to her about this opportunity that I had. And she's like, yeah, I mean, let's move to California. Like, that would be cool. You know, we've both been on the East Coast our whole lives. Or not our whole lives. I mean, I lived in California for a little bit, but, you know, as adults. And then Stephanie's like, hey, I'm moving to California with you. Don't you think we should probably, like, talk about getting married or something? I was like, yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, 2 weeks later, I proposed to her. You know, it's like super not cool, super not cute. You know, it's like we talked about it, and then 2 weeks later I did it. You know, it's like, hey, honey, I'm gonna go run some errands, and you know, went out and got her a ring, and then tried to get her a ring, and then I was like, I don't know what she likes, and so I ended up like, you're gonna pick out your own ring. So it was like, you know, that it wasn't. I'm not super romantic in that way.
It wasn't the fairy book proposal.
Oh, no, not at all.
Hey, it works, though, you know. Well.
But, yeah, it works. I mean, my wife and I communicate. We're very straightforward. Like, she hates surprises and stuff, so it works out well. We're typically pretty pragmatic about our approach to things. But anyway, so I decided, yeah, I'll take this job. At the time, I thought it was, you know, pay was awesome, $16 an hour. It's like nothing great, guaranteed. You know, they said $16 an hour, and I guarantee you'll get $45,000 a year. I'm like, cool. Looking back, I'm like, I definitely could have gotten more than that.
Yeah, that's why in California too. That's like some fast food places pay their employees $16 an hour.
Dude, stop yelling at me. I was young and dumb and just wanted to get out of the Marine Corps. One of the reasons that I wanted to get out is because as a surveyor, well, even as an FDC Marine, really what you have to look forward to is an ops chief and an FDC. And that's, excuse me, that's really it. Like, that's, unless you lap move or go to like MARSOC or something like that, there, you know, you're pretty much going to be in an FDC or the battalion COC like for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
That wasn't really something that I wanted to do, especially after having all those experiences working with, you know, you guys on the Hill. You know, that was something cool, but I didn't really want to do the lap move thing. For whatever reason, I think I was just young and dumb. I don't know. Looking back, I could have done that, but after, you know, the 6 months prior to me getting out, I saw so many ops chiefs either make or get blamed for like silly, small, stupid things that led to potentially disastrous things that luckily nothing ended up like terrible except for that lady's car getting hit by that illume round because nobody finished the trajectory for the illume round.
I thought it was it was Mike 825, and I thought it was because the trajectory was so shallow
or something. I don't even remember what it was, but you know, like that was the only incident that
they changed the regulations after that. They can't shoot that shallow of a, I don't know what you call it, what the angle is for elevation.
Yeah.
But they can't shoot that shallow of an elevation anymore because of that.
Yeah, there's not very many places you can shoot like it's that below like a certain angle on the cannons. I mean, I know you can still do direct fire at 29 palms, but there's not that many places where you can shoot shallow. But anyway, I had seen so many of those guys get relieved, and they were, you know, sending a lot of people to ops chief's course earlier than I think they should have, in my personal opinion. Not to say that they weren't capable Marines, but I think that there's something to be said for spending a lot of time in the FDC before you go and get safety certified as an ops chief.
Oh,
and
definitely.
Then all of a sudden take on all this risk and liability and stuff. And I got kind of frustrated with how they were putting people kind of in that position. And then I was at 29 Palms, I think, and I got a call from somebody back at Lejeune that said, hey, the monitor's here this week, wanting to talk to first year guys or first enlistment guys about reenlisting and orders and all that stuff. And I was like, well, if I reenlist, I want to go to Afghanistan. This is before I really had any real conversations with Stephanie, because this was probably back in like September 2010 or August 2010, something like that. And the monitor, what I got back was the monitor said, if you reenlist, you're going to Okinawa. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I literally said I want to go to Afghanistan, and so I'm going to get out then. Like, I don't want to go to Okinawa. That's not, like, I'd rather go to Pendleton than Okinawa. And they're like, no, it's either Okinawa or get out. And I was like, okay, I'm done.
Check you later.
yeah, so I decided to get out. And then the transition process, honestly, I think the transition would have been a little bit more difficult, but with Stephanie's brother getting killed and having that extra 2-week break back home, not just back home, but with a whole bunch of guys from MARSOC and a whole bunch of Anglo-Co dudes, it gave me like this basically like week and a half of hanging out with a bunch of Marines that have, there's a bunch of guys that were from Anglo-Co that had already gotten out. So it gave me the opportunity to talk to those guys and their experiences, and a bunch of guys from MARSOC, which, you know, when I got out, going to artillery with the intent of being in the ground combat forces and the Marine Corps, I thought that I'd be able to go do like a, you know, combat deployment. And all I did was, or what I did, I try not to say all I did and discount myself. What I did was a civil affairs deployment. And there was like I had a little bit of distaste about that, and I was talking to some of the guys in MARSOC, like, dude, I wish that, you know, all these guys have been, you know, deployed 4, 5, 6 times to Afghanistan, and I was kind of expressing, you know, kind of my, I guess guilt would be the best way to put it. I don't know. You've talked about it on other podcasts with guys that either don't deploy or deploy and sit on the fob the whole time, and, you know, it's kind of, you know, at a certain point you join the Marine Corps and have a certain expectation of being involved in, you know, a certain amount of combat stuff. And so when I got out, it kind of gave me the opportunity to talk to those guys and decompress a little bit, like deal with some of that stuff, and recognize like what I did and kind of quantify and qualify, you know, my time in the service, and, you know, how to apply those things, what to take with me, what to leave behind, you know, mainly leaving a lot of my frustration and all that stuff behind, you know, that doesn't do you any good, you know, hanging on to that kind of stuff. So my transition was a little bit different because I was, you know, kind of thrown into this really shitty situation with my wife and her family are amazing. And the way that they processed that whole thing, like, was incredible to me from, you know, an outsider getting thrown into this situation of being now in a Gold Star family and all of the ups and downs that go along with that. It's still impressive to me, you know, the way that my wife and her family handled everything, and her mom, I can't remember if he was the general in charge of all of MARSOC. I think he was the MARSOC CG. Paul Lefebvre, he's retired.
Yeah,
you know him? Because he went.
The only reason I know who he is because when I graduated from boot camp, he was the CG at Paris Island, or he was the commander of Paris Island.
Yeah, he was the CG there when I graduated too.
Yeah, and then he was like the first or second like commander. I think he was the second commander at MARSOC CG.
Yeah, and anyway, he was there at Dennis's funeral, and so I got to talk to him a little bit. And dude, talking to a guy, an officer that has lived through that many years and so many different things in the Marine Corps gives you so much of a different perspective than, you know, even at the battalion level, you think you're seeing the forest, but you're really, like, you were not even scraping the surface of the Marine Corps. So I, you know, getting the opportunity to talk to him and then listen to my mother-in-law, her speech at her son's funeral, and putting everything into perspective about, you know, why a lot of these guys do what they do, and, you know, the fact that, yes, he died, but he died doing something that he loves for a country that he loves. And that was like, hearing that,
that's
like,
tough, man.
Yeah, it's tough, but she, like, that message, it was funny because General Lefebvre was like, I wish that I had recorded that and I could play that over and over to so many different people about, you know, how to handle dealing with all that stuff. It was kind of, it was a crazy thing being at that funeral. And then there was like so whenever anybody in the Marine Corps dies, they get assigned what is the position?
Oh yeah, a casualty affairs officer.
CACO. CACO. And the CACO that they had was awesome. This dude they're still friends with him. He was a reservist out of Cleveland, and he's still in Cleveland. They're friends with him still. But then if you do like a full honors ceremony with Marines carrying the casket and all that stuff is generally managed by the local reserve unit.
Yeah.
And so obviously if there are Marines there, like from their unit or whatever, like I was there and a couple other guys that ended up being pallbearers, but like you have like a staff NCO that manages the whole funeral procession thing and all that. It was funny because there's one dude, he's still in, doing some, high speed stuff in places all over the world, but he was there, he was a staff sergeant at the time. And it was kind of a everybody partying, getting drunk, that whole thing. And so he shows up. We're all hungover for the funeral, and he's in his blues, and he's got his blues coat undone, and he's got his cover in his hand, just in a funeral home, getting ready for the whole thing. And the staff NCO from the reserve unit comes over, and he's like, "Hey, Staff Sergeant, you should probably like button up your blues coat. There's like a general over there." He's like, "Oh, you mean Paul? Yeah, we're good. Don't worry about it. Paul's awesome." It was like, so it was kind of funny because like these reserve guys who obviously the only thing that they really get to deal with when they're not doing drill is shitty stuff like funerals. Like, it's not cool. I wouldn't want that job personally. Like, that's a shitty. You only get the bad end of the stick. But them getting immersed with all these guys from MARSOC who are like cowboys and just like rolling in.
Two different worlds.
Two wildly different worlds. And it was kind of funny to watch. But anyway, so that kind of helped me deal with my transition in a very screwed up way. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't understand that whole thing. But
what do you mean, like seeing him try to correct him?
No, not that particular incident. I mean, just the whole thing. And having the opportunity to talk to all those different Marines from all the different facets of the Marine Corps, from Anglo, from the reserve side, from MARSOC to the senior officers that were there, and having the opportunity to talk to all of those guys and take all of that and kind of reevaluate my service and kind of look at it from a new perspective. That helped me with my transition. But honestly, one of the reasons that I loved the first company that I went to work for is that everybody was so close. There were a lot of guys that were also in the Marine Corps there, but there were also guys that weren't. But everybody, it was all outdoors, hard work, 10-hour, 12-hour days, and the closest way to bring a team together is to go through physical hardship. Hard labor.
Shared misery.
Yeah, shared misery is the best way to bring a group of people together. And so, that first job, there were so much shitty weather, working in Missouri in December, super cold, just all kinds of just terrible stuff to work in that is just awesome. And people probably won't understand that. Like, why is a shitty job awesome? But whatever it is. Money wasn't great, but the experiences I think were really good. And after a year and a half, I ended up obviously proving my capability to at least partially lead people or ask them to do things politely, and they do it. However you want to look at it. I got promoted into a management position. We moved up to Northern California. And I took over as operations manager for an office in the same company. And I had a team of when I got there, it was 8 guys. And I was in that office in Northern California for almost 5 years. The company ended up getting bought out midway through that time by a much larger company, which gave me the opportunity to get another promotion. And by the time I left that office, I was running that office in Northern California as well as one in Oregon. And in total between those two offices, I think there were 60 people. It was crazy. The experience that I had before I was 27 years old, and from a management perspective, were nuts. And I attribute a lot of that to, working in a small section, survey section of the Marine Corps, getting thrown into all these circumstances where I'm in these briefings with high-ranking officers, and giving my spiel in 2 minutes of this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is the schedule that we need, this is the timeline that we need, this is the notice that we need, blah 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 blah. We'll be on these freaks. Let us know when you need us. Give us this much. All that whole thing, and it really gives you a lot of practice in distilling down exactly what you need to know, when you need to know it, who you need to tell it to, all of those things that kind of lead into
what's important, what's bullshit.
What filter through and be able to disseminate what actually matters. And
Yeah.
and just, one of the things that in talking to guys that used to work for me that they always appreciated, and having experienced in worse ways from other managers, was I kept the bullshit out. Like, when you work for a corporation, there's so much shit that comes down about, oh, we need to do this, and the social media policy, and your timesheets need to have this, and like all this just stupid corporate whatever. Yeah, maybe it needs to happen, but it doesn't need to be. It's not as important as accounting thinks it is, right?
Yeah.
And so you distill it down and communicate it in the right way at the right time, and not put a lot of stress on people that already, like I talked about, are working in the field 10, 12-hour days. It's a shitty job. They don't need any more stress. They don't need to hear about the corporate office bullshit. And so that has allowed me to have a few guys that I have very good friends that, just from people that used to work for me, because, it's in the Marine Corps, in a small team like that. Yeah, you're the team chief or section chief or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, you're still friends with everybody, because in order for you to understand how they work and the things that they are going to be stressed out by, and when to not worry about them in what situations, and when to worry about them in other situations, you have to be their friend. You have to understand how they work and all that stuff.
Well, the military is completely different too, because not only are you like leading these people and you're going to work and you're telling them like, hey, this is what I need done and stuff like that, but when you're off work, you're living with them. Like, you're together all the time. Yeah. Even if you don't hang out with Lance Corporal so-and-so, he's still 2 rooms down from you. Like, you know where he is. You run into him. You see him at the chow hall, stuff like that. Like, out of work. Like, you're really never out of work.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's a different... So you definitely get to know people, and that's why people's, like, military bonds are so strong. It's because you just can't imagine knowing somebody as well as that, except for, like, your own family that you live with, because that's exactly what you're doing.
Well, one of the cool things is, when I came in, I was 18... going on 19. I was 18 at boot camp. I guess I turned 19 at boot camp. And I came in as PFC, and I was in the barracks until I got out as a sergeant. And so, being in the barracks as a sergeant gives you, from a leadership and mentorship perspective, it gives you so much more time. Because when you're, living out in town and you have family obligations out in town and all that stuff, and even towards the end when Stephanie came down to North Carolina and we were living at her sister's house, I still spent a lot of time at the barracks with the guys working on the small Marine Corps stuff, the stuff that, the stupid uniform things that, from a workup perspective aren't really a big deal, but, if you're going to make this your career, there are little things that you can do that can help you just avoid conflict. Making sure your uniforms are squared away, making sure your MCIs are done, making sure, just all the different stuff for promotion, doing
the check in the box stuff that should just come naturally.
It should come naturally, but when you're in it and you're doing the deployment workup stuff, it can get really distracting to worry about all the little stuff, and so it takes kind of a little bit of stewardship to say, no, guys, I'm telling you, I got promoted to sergeant in 3 years because I was taking care of all the little things. And I'm trying to help you make sure that you don't miss out on an opportunity to do that because you think it's not important because you're getting ready to go to Afghanistan. Because I can tell you, as soon as you get to Afghanistan, you're not going to have any time for this shit.
Yeah.
So get it done now when you could go out to the bar and get drunk and whatever, or you could take 2 hours before that and knock out an MCI, even though this Marine Net course or whatever is like the most ridiculous shit in the world, spelling for Marines or whatever. It's still something that you have to get done. They won't let you get promoted.
Get your 7 fucking MCIs done.
Yeah, right? So it's
like, get them 100 points.
So it was kind of cool living in the barracks the whole time. Sorry, we keep jumping.
No, that's cool. But... So one thing I do want to circle back on, and I like that you said, is that you were describing something. You're like, hold on, let me rephrase that. I don't want to discount my own service, and that's definitely something that people do. And like you said, you're around all these dudes that did all this stuff, but even amongst those dudes, they will still be like, oh, so and so's done all this crap. He's crazy, man. And it's everybody has done more than somebody and less than somebody else, and it's just one of those things that some people yeah, they just never. It's hard for them to get over the fact that they never got to go to the show. They get to go out and get into the fight, and it's like, or they got into the fight, but it wasn't like as glamorous as they thought it would be, or like maybe they only got in one firefight. So, oh well, so and so's been in 5 firefights, and it's just it's crazy how you'll discount your service like that, and people that 1 year in the Marine Corps, 1 year in the fleet, going to the field and doing training and stuff like that, the life experiences you gain from that, of being like in a combat arms unit for a year and actively training and doing it, even if you don't deploy, you've gained so many life experiences that people on the outside can never even, realize. Shared misery, you'll probably be more miserable than you've ever been, but you'll be closer with people than you've ever been. You're asked to handle explosives. You're asked to, plan a convoy of trucks, which when you're in, it sounds like stupid. You're like, I'm okay. I planned a route for 10 trucks to drive down. But in the real world, like, try to get 10, it's just stuff like that. I don't know. People discount it because it seems like it's so stupid or simple in the military, but when you come out in the real world, it's not as simple as I don't know, we make it out to be. But I do like the fact that you say, don't discount your service. And that's one thing I like about doing this podcast is that, and I'm going to keep trying to bring on different people, so that you can see, and no one I've brought on has been like some special operations person, whatever. Everybody's done different things. Everybody's done more than some people, less than others, but everybody has cool stories, and that's the whole thing, is that everybody's has, it doesn't matter if you only did 4 years, you've walked away in that 4-year time period with some like lifetime memories and probably some friendships that'll last a lifetime, So, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, one of the things that I struggle with, and like when I'm trying to think how to phrase this without offending anyone. I don't want to discount my service, but I don't want that to define my life. Even though it has changed my life for the better forever. I don't want the only thing that I have to be happy about or proud of or whatever is that 4-year period.
Yeah, I mean, that's just such a small fraction of your life.
Yeah, and, even as simple as, like, military discounts, right? Like, it sounds dumb, but, like, I hate going to the store, like, oh, you guys have a military discount? It's probably a mental thing for me. I just don't want to, like...
I don't even ask for it.
Yeah, I know.
I just pay, because I hate any kind of recognition. I don't stand up at baseball games. Like, my kid gives me crap about it, because I won't... They're like, oh, veterans, stand up. And I'm like, no, not me, man.
I'm more than happy if I can share my experiences to make somebody else's experience better, then that's what I want to do. I don't want to go out of my way to share my experiences to make me feel better, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and I feel like there are a lot of people that kind of, especially like the first 5 years after they get out, like that was kind of like the old don't let high school football be the greatest thing you ever did in your life, right?
Yeah.
Kind of living like that, and it's not my thing, and I feel like the Marine Corps, especially with one enlistment, gives you a very good launch point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's up to you to decide what you do with that launch point. And talking specifically to the people that are getting out after 1 or 2 enlistments is, especially coming out of combat arms, where everybody talks about transferable skills, and really the most valuable transferable skill you have coming out of combat arms is your ability to make decisions in high stress situations and your ability to effectively lead people. Even if you never really held a leadership position, I am quite sure that you experienced a bad leader, and it taught you what not to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of I wouldn't say bad leaders. Leaders.
No, there's plenty of bad leaders.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, people that rule with an iron fist, and in the real world, the iron fist doesn't work. And so you have so much experience to draw from, and so many different people that you have worked with, and having to adapt to. This guy just showed up, and you need to figure out how to motivate him in the next 5 days, because you're going to 29 Palms next week. And so you need to figure out people really fast and figure out how to fit them fit them into the team. And maybe you're not leading the team, but it doesn't matter. You're still part of the team, and everybody has to absorb that guy in. And part of that is you doing your due diligence to figure out how to do that best.
Yeah.
And so from the perspective of hiring people and looking at resumes and stuff, so many people put so much emphasis on, quantifying experiences. And, quantifying experiences is great, like if you're going for like a business management type job, quantify budgets and all that stuff. But, I led 32 convoys. Like, yeah, don't tell me how many. Just tell me that you led and planned convoys, because that's what matters. Like, I understand that you understand logistics, the quantity, whatever. I mean, after one, you understand. After you do one convoy planning, like legit convoy planning, you understand everything that goes into that. And I understand that you know logistics and logistical challenges and how to get around them and stuff like that. And focus more on, these are all the teams that I was on. These are the things that my teams accomplished. And, focusing on the teamwork aspect, getting into the civilian world, everything is a team.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, you're a part of a team. Whether you're an independent contractor doing graphic design like you're doing, you're part of a larger team. Whether you're an augment to somebody's marketing team, or you're part of a team that's, doing construction work or whatever, really, as a hiring manager, I want to make sure that you can work well in a team environment, and show me how and why you know that you can do that, and so, communicate that to me.
What do you think is like the biggest mistake that veterans use on their resume? Like they put down, they don't word it right, so that like they take out the military terminology and civilianize it, or is it just not, or are they discounting their service and not putting down like, hey, leadership, like that's something I did? Or,
there's a lot of discounting of the service. There's a lot of, I mean, even I did it. What I ended up doing in the past 3 or 4 years, I moved my service out of my work experience and into my education. Because that's the way, from when I'm explaining to people what my time in the Marine Corps did for me, it essentially was 4 years of hardcore education in leadership and logistics and camping, hardcore camping, and
camping without campfires.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, do not light a campfire. Shooting, figuring out how to make everything work together in a very complex area in a short period of time. And so, explaining it in that way and kind of putting that kind of twist on it, I think has been helpful to kind of bypass. One of the other things is what happens is people either focus on it too much or not enough. And it's like there is a happy place, but you have to recognize that that's not the only thing that you have, is not like your job, right? You either focus too much on your job or not enough on your job and the other things that taught you. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically extrapolate, and when you're applying for a job, when you get out of the military, it's your resume is going to any number of hiring managers, and they are trying to do the math and figure out how you fit into their team. Mm-hmm. And you need to make that math as easy for them as possible. And even if it really, what you want to get to is to a point where somebody says, I don't really care what this guy's going to do. I know that he or gal, I don't know what they are going to do, but I know that regardless of what I ask them to do, they will learn it quickly and they will assimilate into the team quickly. And so, it's important to learn how to present yourself, both in the way you dress and the way you speak, in a way that helps to communicate that even further. Because
that you're a professional.
Exactly. It's so easy to come out of the Marine Corps and fuck this, fuck that, and all this, oh, this shit was awesome. But that shit scares people. Especially if they don't have a lot of experience with veterans, like they think that you're fucking nuts. And you're not.
I've limited some of my storytelling to regular people, because it's like what you think is kind of normal, is normal within the military. Like, yeah, you're right. It scares the fuck out of people. They're like, you did what?
And there's a stigma about PTSD. And,
it's real bad.
The amount of times that I have been asked by people that think they're comfortable enough with me to ask me about that kind of shit. And I'm just like, first of all, that's not something that you ask people. Like, if somebody actually does have PTSD, like, it's a real struggle. And it's a lifetime struggle that they are trying to get past, and they don't want to talk about it. And like, you don't just ask people if they have PTSD. Like that's not cool. If they're in front of you and they can keep their calm composure, then look at them like they're any other person. And so when people come out and start telling stories about, oh man, we were on the Mew this time and all this shit, and people are like, what in the fuck is this dude? Is this dude nuts? And the Marine Corps makes us all a little bit crazy. We are a little bit risk takers and whatever. But you need to figure out how to temper that and put it to a point where you can maintain professionalism, like around any type of person. And I feel like I had a couple of unique experiences that taught me that early on in my Marine Corps career. Whereas a lot of people, I could imagine being in the grunts as getting out as a corporal who's a team or squad leader, and your only real experiences outside of the grunts are at training courses and stuff like that, where everybody else is a grunt, and it becomes a lot more difficult because you aren't thrown into as many of those situations where you have to recognize what's I guess I need to control myself real quick.
Yeah.
So it's easy. I would think it's easy to forget about how important professionalism is, especially with people that it's not their world. And so many working in the Bay Area of California, there are not a lot of veterans, and there's a lot of nerds, geeks, whatever you want to call them. A lot of software people that they don't have a lot of interaction with people to begin with, and if you come over the top, I'm a pretty boisterous person, and I'm fairly aggressive in the way that I present myself and I talk to people, and I've screwed myself over because people just are uncomfortable with that shit.
They're scared of you.
Yeah,
they're like legitimately like, dude, this dude fucking scares me.
Yeah. So I've even like when I first got out, my boss was like, dude, I can hear you wherever you are in this facility. I can hear you. Your voice is really loud.
Well, you're like me. Neither one of us have a problem with people hearing us. We're fucking loud ass dudes.
So, but what he was saying was you need to figure out a way to make it so that your voice is not booming wherever you go, because it's intimidating. It wasn't intimidating to him. He was also a Marine. Like he went through the same thing. But he's like, there are a lot of people that are going to be like, is this guy okay?
Yeah.
And
I know what you're saying. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So anyway, what were we talking about?
I don't know. Well, you want to go ahead and, since we're just over 2.5 hours, you want to go ahead and wrap it up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Cool. You got any, you want to throw any of your social media out there or organizations or anything that you want to promote?
Social media, you're more than welcome to follow me on Instagram. You'll see a lot of pictures of a baby and dogs. That's what is it? R Meyer 72 or 7211, something like that.
It's funny, half the people I talk to can't even remember their Instagram name.
Dude, I mean, it's not like I walk around like, hey, follow me. I don't even know what it is. R Meyer, RMEYER 7211. And then as far as organizations, Marine Raider Foundation, I have run 2 Marine Corps marathons in support of the Marine Raider Foundation. The Marine Raider Foundation was founded in 2012 with a mission to support Marine Raiders, their families, primarily with people transitioning out of the service, people that have been injured, and families of those deceased. And their website is marineraiderfoundation.org, I think, but you can Google Marine Raider Foundation.
Yeah, if you want to, if you send me the link too, I'll put it in the show notes.
I will. Really good organization. We generally go, they have resiliency events every year for Gold Star families, for fallen Marine Raiders. And those are good events. And our team ended up raising, just between me and my wife and my mother-in-law, we ended up raising like $6,000 for the Marine Corps Marathon last year, or as part of the Marine Corps Marathon in support of the Marine Raider Foundation. Our whole marathon team as a whole raised like $95,000. It was crazy.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. Really cool experience, really good organization. The president is Derek Herrera, who you may know of. He's a Marine captain who got shot He was a team leader, and he got shot and paralyzed. He's a, what is it called when your legs are? It's just your legs are paralyzed. It's not quad, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, he's paralyzed, but he's a really good dude. He's been on CNN, Fox News, spreading the good word. You know, kind of changing the face of what I would say a lot of people. I mean, the Raiders. The whole reason they were disbanded was because there was a really bad stigma about them in the 60s and 70s, and so they disbanded them, and they ultimately got the title back fairly recently. And so every member of that organization has always strived to present a very professional outward appearance, because they know how difficult it can be, especially when you talk about the snipers and the Eddie Gallagher case and all these special operator guys that get caught in these tight spots for whatever reasons we can debate another time. But so really good organization that helps further a really good image of MSOB and what they do.
That's good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story and catching up. I haven't talked to you. I haven't seen you. It's the first time we've seen each other, even though it's over video. And
dude, it's probably been like 10 years.
It had to have been. I mean, when I left to go to Afghanistan in 2000, what was it, March of 2011, when I attached to 3-6. I mean, that was the last time I saw any of you guys. I came back from that deployment, and a lot of guys had moved out of 210, and then 210 turned around and deployed like a couple weeks after I got home. So I was RBE. So yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, but definitely good seeing you and stuff like that. For all the listeners, make sure to check out my page. It's jkramergraphics.com, and my Instagram is jkramergraphics. And that is all I've got. So have a good one.